Okay, everybody back safe and sound, withstood the attack.
That's great. That's great.
We're going to get started. We're going to alter our agenda a bit to accommodate people whose schedules have been a bit disrupted by this morning's surprise. So we'll begin by approving the minutes. We'll begin by approving the minutes. Can I get a motion on the minutes that have been distributed?
Motion.
And a second, and then any comments, changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
The second item is we're going to affirm, make a real the filling of the vice chair position for the board admirably filled, but without the formality of a vote, a renewal of the term. Derek Cephas has, as I say, been admirably filling this position, and I'm going to move his re-election for the term that will end in January of next year. So that's a motion on my part.
Seconded.
Any discussion? It's the same salary.
Yeah, no. I appreciate it, yeah.
I move to double it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Acclamation, affirmation. Thank you, Derek. Seriously, much appreciated. I'm going to hold the executive director update. It will come later, and move to the ad hoc adolescent and young adult committee update, which will lead into the presentation request for a limited variance, and then followed by a public comment period before any vote. So, Brian, would you?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you a brief update about adolescents and young adults because I've asked Commissioner Pont and his team to give a much more comprehensive update regarding his young adult plan. I can tell you regarding the boys and girls, the teenagers that we have out, most of them are in RNDC and Rosie's. All of them, including those young people that are in True and Shoe, are all going to school all day. There's only a few adolescent girls out at Rosie's. I know there was a comment about the nursery at the last board meeting. Just want you to know that I've gone to the nursery at Rosie's. It is being utilized. People are being accepted, and the young women that are there are very, very pleased with the program. The commissioner has created a young adult housing in a dormitory for the young ladies at Rosie's where they are attending school, and have some additional programming as well. With respect to the young adult males, we have 650 young adults, and numbers may have changed a little bit over the last few days, that have been moved into GMDC as part of the Commissioner's Young Adult Plan. He'll give you more of the details. They're restarting a lot of the housing programs, housing units with a lot of programming. He had an opening for the Peace Center last Tuesday. Many advocates and staff were invited, and that stands for Program, Education, and Community Engagement. There'll be computer labs, really a very large open space with various classrooms for additional programming. This is in addition to the main school area classrooms, and in addition to the annex school. So there really is a huge amount of space now for class and programming. Commissioners opened 2 SHU units, Second Chance Housing, 2 True units. It's the transitional restorative units. I've had an opportunity to view them a few times, including yesterday. They were very calm. I have to tell you, GMDC is the calmest I've ever seen it in the 2.5 years that I've been on this Board of Correction. It's very calm. There's been very smooth opening to these 2 units. There appears to be regular officers, whether they're steady or not, I'm not sure, but they tend to be regularly assigned to the units. They understand the protocol, they're following the protocol. Young people, to a great extent, understand why they're there and what they need to do to leave. Most of them, or many of them, were in school yesterday. They're still working out the kinks to make sure we get all the true kids to school. That's in the annex, and the SHU kids are supposed to be going to the main school, as I understand it. Those in true and SHU, and these are our 2 alternatives to punitive seg, and we'll be talking about the secure in a few moments, but those that were not in school, I saw actively engaged with clinicians, mental health clinicians, program counselors, as well as the officers. So it certainly appears to be off to a very good start, these 2 alternatives to punitive seg. And but for these units, many of these young men would be serving time in punitive segregation. As I've mentioned, each time I go there, I continue to see a marked difference in the environment that our young adults are being housed in, certainly in GMDC right now. It is calm. It is bright. There are many officers. They are very engaged. When I speak to them, they understand about the change in the culture that the commissioner is bringing about, and they buy into it. They agree with it. From those I've spoken to, there's been dramatic improved morale among the officers as well as the young adults. I'm really starting to see that the young adults are the youth that they are. And they're presenting more as youthful and very interested in what they're participating in, including recreation. And I'm very pleased to see a lot of movement. Part of what the young people don't want, they don't want to be sitting in a housing unit all day long. They're moving. They're going to school, they're going to recreation, they're going to law library. So this is very good news indeed. The commissioner will be updating you in a moment, but I just want to use this as an opportunity to say that we've been working very closely, the Board of Correction, together, and with the Department of Corrections and with Health and Hospital. And I think after a 1.5 years of working very hard to end punitive seg, we, the City of New York, through the leadership of Commissioner Pont and Mayor de Blasio, are on the verge of actually eliminating solitary confinement for our young adults 18 to 21 years of age. And this is historic. Yes, let's give it a This is truly historic and momentous. And when I joined the board 2.5 years ago, there were hundreds of adolescents and young adults in solitary confinement. And I believe as of yesterday, there were only about 30 or 35. So many of them have been moved into SHU and TRUE and will be moved into secure. So at this time, let me call upon Commissioner Pont and his team to provide an update on the young adult planning.
I'd just like to say thank you for comments. We have nothing to add. That was a really good report.
Thank you, Judge. So I'll start off with a couple things because I think it's actually important what you suggested. We had made some announcement at the City Council yesterday, but I want to reaffirm the department's commitment to more effectively and efficiently using punitive seg, which means obviously reducing it. When the commissioner started back, we had approximately 600 inmates in punitive segregation. We've moved that down to 163, a drop of over 70%. Within the young adult population, obviously with the adolescents, we ended it, and for the young adults, we are firmly committed to ending it for the 18 to 21 year olds. Currently, we have around 38 in punitive segregation right now. The move at GMDC has been a bear of a project for the entire department. Currently, we have about 73% of the young adults who are supposed to be in GMDC in there. As the judge noted, that's about 640 of those people inside GMDC already. There are continued exceptions for those who are either in CAPS or PACE or in detox units, and they'll remain outside. We continue to plan for moving the rest of the 18 to 21 year olds in. As the judge noted, we've started 2 second chance units, and they're going well as can be, obviously, and we're diverting people out of people who were going to punitive seg, either those who were in punitive seg and giving them an opportunity to come out and participate in second chance or true, or those who were formally on a backlog and waiting and moving them into that housing unit. Similarly, we're focusing on the infrastructure. A lot of the work on the cell doors that we've initially alerted as a security risk have been abated. Obviously, we have to consistently go through those to now check that additional things aren't put into the locks to make sure that they stay clear of kind of the concerns we had in the beginning. But the work on both the cell doors, the camera coverage within the housing units, and the painting and the addition of the televisions and the transmitters, all of which to create that environment that the judge was referring to, a quieter, calmer environment both in the cells and the dorms, are moving forward. The staffing, as we've said, the staffing are getting their required training so that when they take on the posts of having the restarted units, they have the requisite training. We have already moved forward in getting the dialectical behavioral training for those who will be participating in the secure units. So that's a higher level of training and a higher level of kind of interaction with the inmates. Obviously, we're working with health and hospitals to make sure that the treatment plans that we put in place for the inmates are working in the true units so that we can transfer that and use them in the proposed secure units. A special emphasis has been placed on programming, and thanks to Annette Saunders and her programming team, we've done a lot. And also an additional thanks to Deputy Commissioner Walsh, who instituted the programming in GRVC for our model facility, for lending a hand there, so that we can have a good mix of programming. Those that are very focused on training to jobs, as well as just general programming inside the facilities, to include ICANN and some of our higher learnings, our partnerships with Columbia University and CUNY, to provide more educational programming to the inmates as well. So we've now got over 23 housing units that have full 3.5 hour programming. Obviously going to ratchet that up to 5 hours as soon as we can, but we're moving forward and trying to get everything ready. We have program counselors hired who are coming in as well to do the assessments. They'll be assigned to different housing units, particularly in the secure units. We'll have program counselors in those units. And overall, those efforts with the programming counselors have been good. They've been doing assessments on needs and preferences so that we're not just providing programming, but for those who actually show a specific interest, we're trying to give them top 3 choices on programming that are available to really engage the inmates who are in those areas. So I wanted to provide first kind of that overview of where we are with the young adults before moving towards kind of our proposed plan for the secure, to give you a sense of the progress that we've made. We've certainly pushed it a long way. With 73%, we're very close to starting. As everyone knows, we had a phased plan for ending punitive seg, and we wanted to create alternatives. Second chance was that first, true was the second, secure. We have basically tried to focus on those who would probably be our most problematic youth, those with longer histories of violence, and where second chance or true may not be appropriate, or for those who we've moved into true, but true proved not to be appropriate, so moving them to secure. So I'd like to move on at least to the presentation to the board. As everyone knows, sorry, I'm not sure if anyone's going to be able to read that because obviously the board is in the way, but I'll just kind of read through and we can figure out questions. But essentially, DOC is still planning to eliminate punitive segregation in June 2016. Obviously, in doing so, we're setting a national precedent. There's an ongoing steady reduction in those young adults who are on punitive seg. We had over 50 or so when we initially made the plan to just do the restarts. And this is, we've already reduced before that, and now down to 38. We've created programming alternatives in Second Chance and True, and I think everyone should realize that we're using those as models, as well as continue to visit other jurisdictions like Massachusetts who have units dedicated to the adolescents. So we're not just taking our own lessons, but we're taking lessons learned from other jurisdictions to try to create this. We know that the secure units are specifically new programmatic units that we're going to focus for our most persistent and serious violent behavior. Right now, the Our ultimate plan is to have about 20% of, we have a population, a whole population that we've kind of tried to estimate for persistent problems, whether it's kind of just multiple infractions to kind of violent history. So we set up both second chance that would ultimately have about 10 to 12 inmates per unit. We'll have 2 of those units at first. True, we have 8 to 10 inmates per unit, and we'll have about 6 of those housing units. Those are much more kind of focused. And then for secure unit, we'll have kind of 8 inmates per unit. Our current plan is to have 7 of those housing units, and we'll split that between 2 facilities. The first focus will be at GRVC, where we have our model facility. We know that the staff there have bought into our change. We've seen drastic reductions in use of force. We've had better training, a better environment. So putting that first secure unit with a highly trained staff who've already kind of experienced some of the change or up for that challenge, we think is a good first step. They're smaller units. They'll be constructed there. As Judge Hamill kind of has already seen, what we've done is taken a couple of units and made smaller units out of them to be able to handle a smaller population. Infrastructure alterations are ongoing. They've already been approved by the state's SCOC. We're focusing on staffing the training. The officers who will be in those posts have been selected. It's a higher officer to young adult ratio, so we need more of those people in GRVC. The main focus of that training is both on our safe crisis management as well as the cognitive behavioral intervention that we've talked about in the past. Obviously, programming is a huge part of this. We've put in place the programming counselors as well as other programming to initially have 3 hours of daily programming that will include the dialectical behavioral therapy, the interactive journaling, individual counseling by both our programming staff as well as help from the health and hospitals. We're proposing additional programming of creative writing, art courses, physical exercise. So we're just trying to put those pieces in place to kind of fill the other 2.5 hours on top of the 3. There will be due process for obvious entering into the secure because this is a different area. The placements will be adjudicated with regular reviews, opportunities to appeal. We'll build them off of the ESH due process that we've instituted, as well as the PhD process. The new model is obviously focused on programmatic alternatives to address root causes of violence. We know that there are a persistent population right now, so we need to kind of focus on them. The best practices that we've learned, we're trying to promote pro-social behavior, progressively provide them more incentives as they kind of enter in. Each one of the individuals that enter into these units will be provided a treatment plan. They'll be told what phase they're in within the secure unit, what their treatment plan is, what the path moving out of that phase to the next phase is, so that everyone understands kind of what incentives can be earned as they kind of behave and follow their treatment plan. As we've identified, we will have treatment teams that focus on these individuals, so the progress through the phases will be evaluated by those treatment teams who have a very good understanding of the individual needs, and the very specific treatment plans that have been put in place for those individuals. There are several factors, obviously, that go into meeting these treatment plans. It's programmatic evaluations and participation, but also basic efforts like lack of infractions, compliance with clean cell and housing units, staff compliance, positive interaction with their fellow peers as well as the officers who are in those units. All of those things will be put in place as they're evaluated for movement to the next phase. The phased approach, while a bit of a start at ESH, has proven to be more successful as time has gone by, and we've been able to implement different phases, so we want to kind of promote that effort within the secure units. As I said earlier, these are our most violent and aggressive young adults, so those being placed in the secure units would have very specific criteria for entering in and an evaluation by that treatment team. The assaults on staff or other inmates resulting in serious injuries, slashings or stabbings, persistent violent behavior against other young adults, and those behaviors that can't be addressed within second chance and true. Ultimately, I know this is more into the level of detail, but each of the phases is designed to kind of deal with movement from what we're concerned with, and it's overall built to provide safety and security, but also an incentive model. We want to ensure that as soon as we end punitive seg, where people have been locked in for 23 hours, that transition out, there is some ability to kind of maintain safety and security. We've looked at phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 lockouts, 10 hours for the first phase, 12 hours for phase 2, and an ultimate 14 hours like everybody else for phase 3. And that transition offers an initial minimum placement of 28 days. So before that, there's a due process, there's a treatment plan that's developed, there's a discussion about the placement, the due process goes in place, you can appeal, and then there's a minimum placement before another review, so that we can evaluate where they are and what their progress is within that area. There are other incentives and restrictions that are built in. For the phase 1, restricted commissary of $10, limited to basic hygiene products and bottled water, stamped envelope per week, institutional clothing is required, and personal property is limited to 1 book. As you move past and show that you can basically follow the treatment plan, participate in the programming, show that you've got kind of pro-social behavior, you'll move on to phase 2. That'll be an evaluation and a movement. There you've got a minimum placement again of 28 days before a required review, but the lockouts extend to 12 hours. Your commissary restrictions are increased to $15, limited to more than the hygiene products. You have stationery and bottled water. The institutional clothings are still required. Magazines, family pictures, and other things are afforded. And then ultimately, if you participate through the phase 3 and show continued progress along your treatment plan, you're moved into phase 3. That's minimum placement, again, 28 days before a required review to make sure that the placement is correct. Lockout is extended to the full 14 hours. Commissary spending is limited to 25 per week. Institutional clothing is again required, but more personal property is allowed. And this is basically the last phase before an evaluation on whether or not there should be a transition. Back either into true or into general population, depending on what seemed most likely true, just to kind of make sure that there is actually a transition safely back into general population. But we've built this up to ensure that, particularly for this small population, for which right now we essentially are assuming there would be, over 1,000 young adults are moving into GMDC, and we've only planned for about 70 people who would be, 70 at least, units, individual placements would be in the secure unit at this time. So it would be a very small number, but those that we feel have had a long history of persistent violence. So we've tried to kind of phase that in, and that's what we're piloting through right now, the construction of the secure, and what we're proposing in our variants right now within that phased approach. So all required services will be provided, whether it's in phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3. Classroom for educational services, law library kiosks. The one item within the variance is removing some of the services like the law library into the unit through the addition of kiosks, typewriters, and other areas within a dedicated cell. Mini clinics will be stationed close by so that health and hospitals can have easy and ready access to the secure units. We'll have established practice that are currently in place in several other housing units across the department, like ESH and Second Chance and True. And obviously recreations can be provided in open yard rec areas that are located right outside of these secure units, so they can be moved right out to the outside rec. So with this, we've proposed a variance that asks for exceptions to 2 of the minimum standards, those for the lock-in, as you can see in the phase on what we're requesting, and then in terms of the access to courts and legal services, because we will at least be moving the law library access to the unit themselves. So that's really all I have in terms of kind of a presentation on what we want to do with secure. Obviously the commitment is to kind of move forward with ending punitive seg, but to do that, we need alternatives to that punitive seg, and while we have had some success with Second Chance and True, we do feel we need also this secure unit to make sure we take care of those who are the most persistently violent of this population.
A couple of things I'd like to add. The roadmap out needs to be clearly stated as the inmate comes into the unit. So I know there's some concern on the board of how long an inmate will be held there. So the compliance with the treatment plan will dictate the movement through the tiers of housing and then eventually out of the unit. It will not be a judgment call per se, because you achieve these things and basically you're going to move yourself out. If you don't achieve them, and you're gonna, perpetuate to stay here probably a little bit longer. But I want to be very clear that it'll be totally on the inmate's behalf that if you do what's in your treatment plan, you will move through the system and you'll eventually get out of this housing placement. Second thing that we've agreed not to do is that we would not move inmates from secure to true because of the violent nature of inmates that would be in secure units. So it wouldn't be a step down to secure. Secure may have its own step down, a separate housing unit, but it won't be true. So the offenses that get you in second chance and true would be much different than the offenses that get you in secure. The last point I want to make is timing. It is going to be very important that at some point in time, we have both systems in place. So we have secure functioning and operating at some level, and we also have punitive seg here. So we want to make sure that we show staff how one will work before we jettison the other one. I think that's going to be an important transition. We have to prove to our staff that this is a safe alternative and not, as we did in the adolescent, as Judge Hamill, we just ended one and kind of made up how it's going to run. So since this is a very new concept, we'd like to have some ability over time to have both of them running simultaneously, obviously less dependent on punitive seg, but also have secure up and running and kind of working the bugs out. I think we talked about kind of the startup process.
So, Commissioner, I have to ask you, this is a little contrary, just that last bit, than my understanding. I know I have repeatedly told you in your department that if you were not going to meet the June 1st date, we would have had to have a variance. We have a board and a board meeting here. Our regs call for punitive seg to end June 1st. I've asked you, I've asked your staff, I asked at the meeting I had last week whether there was going to be a variance for that because that's the date. And there has been no, I was told there wouldn't be a variance, there would be a request, and it would end. So I'm a little concerned this is the last board meeting before June 1st and we don't have a variance to extend punitive seg.
So we're still moving toward the June 1st date. As I've said publicly, that there are things like construction of the unit. I mean, if we could be in the unit today, we could be working through all the problems that may arise. How does it operate? How does it function? We're not in the unit today. We're not going to be in the unit next week. So as those dates get closer, it puts pressure on everything else that has to get done for us to operate that unit. So is June 1st a good date? It's the best date we have right now. There are many moving parts to this, and we've said that publicly. And so we're moving as quickly as we can, given the resources we have, to get to that June 1st date. I'm not moving off that date right now, but it would be, I think, problematic to not have secure up and running at least some length of time prior to the end date of punitive seg. But we're not at a point to say, well, that date's out. We're not going to make that date. We're doing, we work very hard to achieve what we've set to the board. June 1st is the date that's the target for the change.
Okay, I know some of us may have questions.
Commissioner, I think we need to make this clear. On the one hand, certain things have to happen to achieve June 1st. I think that part is pretty clear. But are you also proposing that in some final transition, it may be necessary, while demonstrating the effectiveness of the alternatives that have been developed for, I imagine, a short time frame, that some form of PS would continue in that transition beyond June 1st. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's the unknown for us. My hope would be that we would be in a transition, that we may have a little bit of punitive seg left while we're transitioning into secure units. My only concern is that we have to operationalize something that's never been done before anywhere in the country. It's new. I think it's built on fundamental good practice of why it will work. But It's never happened in any correctional agency in the country. Like to be able to, prove to our staff that this is a good model, it will work for you. And at the same time, not try to do too much too quickly to have bad outcomes that will make everything else more difficult.
So I understand the thinking, but the implication of that is that the firm end date, which is what exists now, of June 1st, you're suggesting may need at some future point, because we don't have anything before us, some leeway. And I think we'll have to focus on that question, because there is nothing before us, and all that exists is the June 1st date. So this little bit of additional thought, if you will, is not something that we considered yet, and we need to consider how to deal with that. I'll call it a possibility, because you're not saying that it's a certainty. But come June 1st, as things now stand, that's supposed to be the end date. So we'll have to review that over the next few days.
All of our efforts are focused on June 1st. Everything from policy development to the construction and the unit, we're all focused on June 1st as the date.
Okay. I don't think we can get a clearer understanding of it. Any other questions or comments from board members?
How do you intend to select the inmates for the secure unit from the various units, restrictive units that are operating now?
So the easy selection is those inmates who are currently in punitive setting. So we're vetting those inmates today, and we're doing that to put them in true and second chance already. So some of those have been, as you know, have been filtered out and put in second chance and true. So those that remain, more problematic, more dangerous, is what our classification units are now looking at to say, okay, if June 1st or whatever date we say we're going to move these guys out, this is who's probably going to be insecure given their history and why they're currently in punitive setting. And they don't be on future serious infractions, as we noted, those inmates that have assaultive behavior that would end up as secure. But the sample population would be those currently in punitive setting, the 30 plus that are there now.
In line with Stan's questioning, could you give, let's just say June 1st is the best. What would, in your mind, be the outside time it might take if it was to be longer than June 1st? Or let me state it, I'd be more inclined to support a change if I knew what the date was and we stayed to it hard and fast.
So if I was to stay here and give you a date that I feel very confident about, it would be another 30 days.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying that you want to test secure, and in order to do that, you need to have punitive seg run for some period alongside of secure, right? So that you could demonstrate to staff that it's a viable tool and it's working. Why hasn't that been in the conversation earlier? Why is that now coming up at a time where there's a variance that you're presenting to us? There's full expectation, anticipation that in June 1st, punitive seg is going to end. Why are we now? Why haven't we been talking about, well, I need to run punitive seg simultaneous with true until we can, like, why now?
I think it's always been in the conversation as we come closer to the deadline. If we could open secure today, I wouldn't need anything, because I could run them simultaneously. It wouldn't be a violation to run them simultaneously to the end of the year, because basically if you send it to punitive seg, you're locked up 23 hours a day. So to be locked up less than 23 hours would actually be fine. The thought process as we get closer to the deadline is we're looking at kind of nuts and bolts that have to get done, and maybe it's just jitters, so to speak. We're going to have those nuts and bolts done. This is a big deal, and so you know, I want to be absolutely certain that everything possible is in place. As we get closer to the date, it becomes, anybody's done any planning, it becomes pretty clear, okay, that may be, you know, the kind of red flag things that are showing up, to say, okay, that might be a problem. And that's really all I'm saying. Maybe not. Maybe we can get everything done, but, you know, I would feel better about taking a beating and saying, okay, like you said, you should have told us this before. This is as clearly before as I'm aware of it. But I'd rather have it come out at the end, be what we want, than to rush it. But, so it's not, I'm not pushing dates off. I think we have a pretty good plan. We're working very hard at this. So, you know, stuff that we talked about kind of yesterday that gives me concerns. And maybe, you know, we can work through all of those things.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Comment?
the law, excuse me, Bob, I just want to ask a question on how to handle this. If the board were to, and I haven't discussed this with board members, plan to reconvene before the end of the month to review where you are and what's required in the way of overall variance relief in time, would that adversely affect the department if I were to put off the votes so that all of it was taken care of at one time? Because it appears to me that we're looking at the possibility of having to reconvene over this June 1st anyway.
Yeah, before the commissioner answers that, when the commissioner has been presenting his young adult plan and certainly speaking to my committee about it, he has always said that he wanted to have the Secure up and running for a while and be able to do an assessment before actually ending punitive seg. And it was our understanding that you were going to try to do that about 60 days before June 1. For whatever reason, the renovations and the like did not get, and that's why I kept asking, would you need a variance? Because I wasn't quite sure how you would be able to do that. So my understanding is there's a little bit of a sequencing problem. You can't end punitive seg until you can open the secure unit and move the inmates and know that it's going to work. And you can't open secure units until you get the variance because of the deviation from the lockout as well as the legal services aspect. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we may be looking at a special meeting for the first part of what you said.
Correct.
Comment. You know, it would be preferable, of course, if we were celebrating rather than not knowing exactly what's going on. I do think, you know, in the celebratory mode, that 30% of adolescents were in solitary confinement five or 6 years ago, and now it's in the 3% range. I know, but there were a lot of the adolescents. The adolescents, 30% of them, and school for these kids and these young adults was a piece of paper under a door in self-study. So it's a tremendous accomplishment that I give the department extraordinary credit for. But this is disappointing. I don't understand why you can't let people who are in PSU out for 4, 5, 6 hours a day right now. As we've asked you before, you actually told us you were going to respond to that question by June. It's only May 10th right now.
Well, what we said, when we looked together at safe alternatives
Right.
and how to do that, we did not say we were going to do that.
No, well, but I don't understand why the people in PSU right now can't get out more than 1 hour a day. If you're planning on letting people out, for 10 hours a day in a couple of weeks, these are the same people, and I do think that it doesn't matter at this point, I guess. But I asked in a meeting this week, are we talking about what we're supposedly talking about? And I was told yes. You were at that meeting. I mean that What? Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry, you were at City Hall. You were not present at the meeting, but your council was present at the meeting, and deputy commissioners were present at the meeting, and we were told that it was going to happen. So it's just very important that that this not slip too much, and I would like to hear like a date certain, you know, as you've been asked for. I want to say also in the celebratory mode that we're not getting close to today, that you know, it would be very good if there were less than 1,000 young adults on Rikers Island. That we haven't had too much progress yet on this issue. We need progress from the city, from the judges, from the DAs to not put these people in, to not put them back for technical violations of probation or parole, and for the judges and DAs to not see continuation of jail as a way to treat young people. But I guess we're going to have a meeting, but I would like to, I mean, I think we should see the plan. The board should see what your construction plan is on this thing. I mean, you must know when it's due. I mean, you make plans all the time like this. When is it physically done?
So we actually, I think, to the ad hoc committee, actually provided the blueprints for where these.
Oh no, I saw the blueprints and requested that you provide those blueprints to interested parties so that they could see what they were too. No, you did, but you didn't give us the date. I mean, there's a construction table, right? You have dates when construction is going to be done, right? When the punch list is punched.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're concerned with is making sure. So we have the construction going on right now. I think the judge walked in. We walked in to kind of see kind of the welding and the creation of the kind of expanded metal to subdivide some of the housing units. You know, as we have to add several pieces, the cameras, phones, and so forth. So right now, as the commissioner said, we have to go back and take a look. Right now, we're pushing as hard as we can to make sure we can meet the date. The only thing right now, the plan has always been that we were going to actually run both things, test the secure unit, so that we can kind of move some of the people from the punitive setting into secure unit, test they can be run safely, prove that the staff didn't be done, and then ultimately move everyone out of the punitive setting into the secure unit. So right now, while we're pushing as we can, I think that as the commissioner signaled, we're just trying to focus on whether or not we can make sure that that's done as safely as possible.
No, I appreciate that, Jeff, and I get that. I know you and the commissioner and your team have been working really hard to bring about this significant change. I get that, and I'm not speaking to that, but I am speaking to, today is May 10th. May 10th. Unless Secure is opening tomorrow, which would give you 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks to test it, I don't think 3 weeks would have been enough time to test and to prove it. We knew that on June 1st, even forget whether punitive seg is going to end on June 1st, the fact that you wanted to test it and you wanted to run it simultaneously, it was known. And what we should have had before us is a variance that speaks to that extension of punitive seg, knowing that we have to test. That's all I'm saying. And we just need to, at this point, figure out how to make that happen.
And again, I think we're going to have to consider reconvening the board toward the end of the month when there's a clearer picture on that question.
Is there any alternative to that? I don't really. I mean, given how the calendar works, that looks obvious to me.
The only alternative would be to simply add days to without certainty. We can mull that. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few other things. The commissioner made reference to this, or Jeff did. I did actually go out to GRVC yesterday and see this facility. I can tell you a few things about it. First of all and foremost, it is a far, far, far improvement from the original plan. I believe it was the end of last year, early this year, where they were setting up NYC to move all the young adults in a secure, they didn't call it a secure unit, but it would essentially be held in NYC, and we were very opposed to that, and the board essentially said that could not be done. What I saw is they have a young adult, it's where the punitive seg had been in GRVC for the young adults. They're breaking it up into 4 separate units. You can see the separate day rooms. I saw the cells where they've taken out the beds and the like, and that's where the kiosks will be. There's a pretty large clinical programming room, so it doesn't have to be in the day rooms. As it is in many of the housing units, all the clinical programming is in the day room. The day room's small, but it's much larger than NIC day room was going to be, and it's only going to be for 8 adults. There was a fairly large clinical programming space. There was a really, really nice classroom at the back of the secure unit that is light and bright for the school to be held. And there's also a congregate recreational space that's being built adjacent to it. There's also the mini clinic where all the medical needs can be met right outside of the unit. So in terms of actually seeing it, it's certainly a much greater improvement over a punitive seg or what the plan had been for NIC. We don't have the draft directive yet, and as you'll hear us discuss when we debate the variance, we are expecting that we will have that, and that would be a requirement to opening the secure unit, so we much better understand how the secure is actually going to operate.
I have some additional questions about the unit as you described. I mean, why 1 book, 3 book, 5 books? What is the scientific data that says that people are more likely to behave if you limit the number of books they have and promise them more?
You haven't read those studies?
No, I've been busy. No, seriously, I don't,
The policy's in draft right now, so I think we're open for comments and feedback on policy. So there's nothing, it's not done, so.
Okay, well, I know, but we're approving a variance, on this for a 6-month period, and maybe we should approve a variance for a 3-month period and see how this thing works rather than for 6 months.
The board is asked to approve the policy before it's implemented, so it's in the draft, and we'll probably negotiate.
Well, then I'm just trying to understand what the elements of this thing
The variance is
are.
not necessarily kind of it's specifically on the lockout time and then the.
Well, then okay, so on the lockout time.
In the units.
On the lockout time. I appreciate, Commissioner, you're specifically addressing a concern that board members have expressed about the potential indefinite nature of the 10-hour part of the thing. But if you could explain to me, say if someone is convicted of an infraction, assuming there's through the due process, they have done an act, they have done something which gets them into, earns them secure unit, and say it's an infraction which is a 30-day infraction in the throughout the rest of the disciplinary system, and they just don't participate in programs. They're there. They don't hurt anybody. They don't hurt themselves. They just they lock out of their cells when they want to. They don't lock out. They don't go to school. They don't talk to their correction counselor. They don't talk to the counselor. Then after 28 days, do they get into the second unit?
So it's
And
all
they- yeah.
hypothetical, but they conceptually, in order to change the way people think, they need to participate in some level of programming. The fact that this individual is not harming somebody on any given day is not significant enough to say, have they progressed, cognitively and how they are thinking about violence and harming others, to say that they would progress. But those are team decisions, so it's kind of not one size fits all.
Well,
It's a
I'm
group
just
of
gonna-
individuals looking at an offender, evaluating, all the things that all the historical things that we know about him or her, and then making a decision to move them or not.
Well, I think I understand the theory of it, and generally it seems like a good idea. I don't know why 28 days rather than 14 days, for example. Why you couldn't have people go through this process in 42 days rather than in 87, in 3 months, rather than in, and particularly when you're getting above the length of time that people are being locked out. In general, I mean, you can be in 10-hour, you could be in this 10-hour thing forever. I mean, I anticipate that the secure unit will become, for some people, something like the administrative segregation, or maybe that'll change as we go into it, but a restraint unit that you have right now. You have restraint units where people stay, they're locked out of their cells for 14 hours a day. They have controls over their movement in terms of how they're shackled when they leave places. They leave their housing areas, but they get the 14-day lockout 14-hour-a-day lockout that our rules require. In this unit, there are going to be people who are never going to leave it, I believe. I mean, maybe you have some different notion to me, but I would be surprised if you didn't have something that's the equivalent of a restraint unit for young adults. And are these people going to be in a 10-hour restraint situation? They could potentially be in a 10-hour situation forever, and that's the rule. That's the variance on our standard that you're asking us to approve right now. So I'm concerned that you've set up a program that if people passively don't participate in the program, can have their time out of cell limited for the length of their incarceration. Is that true?
I think in the range of possibilities is true. I think we believe that people can change, and I believe they participate in the programming that we have available to them. They have the ability to work through those processes, but you're right, if somebody just continues to act in the ways that continue to cause violence, that's a possibility.
No, I didn't say act. I said just passively not participate in programming and not demonstrate a change in their...
We come to an agreement when an inmate comes into the unit as to what they have to do to get out. They agree to it. So it's part of what they know they have to do. So if they choose not to do that, then basically they're not participating in the program that they know is a roadmap out of it.
They don't have an option to enter this unit.
They don't have an option.
So it does seem to me that this is an area that we will have to keep a focused eye on the board, how these things are implemented over time. Let me see if I can narrow what we're and focus better on what we have before us. One is the variance against standards to enable the alternatives to PS to be fully formed, tested during this period while we move toward the abolition of PS. There is also the question of how much time is optimally required to test these two things, run them simultaneously for a certain period of time, which we had all thought, the department and the board, would come to conclusion by June 1st optimally. There is some question as to whether or not there is going to be enough time to fully run these things side by side, make the case to the staff, understand, have everyone understand the effectiveness of the alternatives. And before I open up for public comment on the variance, I'm going to ask the board to consider whether, if there is a way to accomplish this, that we add some time to the equation here of the period for selective continuation of PS to allow for that simultaneous operation with, as Steve put it, a date certain as to the end. Because that's certainly what's going to happen in some special, or at least that's what's going to be asked of us in some special meeting. I'm not asking for discussion of that right now. I'd rather let the public have their opportunity to comment on the variance proposal, and at the conclusion, after we've had some time to think about this question, because it does seem as though the issue is clear enough to articulate, not going to change very much between, if at all, between now and some special meeting. So unless there's some additional questions from the board, thank the department, and I'd like to give, we have some individuals who have asked to comment on the variance. I'd like to get to that. I'll call the first three names, and then there are a couple of others after that. Jennifer Parrish, Natalie Block Levin, and Kelsey Diavola.
Good morning, my name is Jennifer Parrish. I'm the Director of Criminal Justice Advocacy at the Urban Justice Center's Mental Health Project and a member of the Jails Action Coalition. The end of punitive segregation for 18 to 21-year-olds is long overdue. The board adopted a rule to end it contingent on funding in January 2015 with the intention that it would be ended by the beginning of this year. A year and 5 months later, young people are still being held in 22 to 24-hour lockdown, conditions that are harmful to their health, and in a system that metes out solitary confinement sentences in a racially biased manner. Those who work in the system and regulate it may see these delays as necessary to make the needed changes, but the fact is, and let's not lose sight of this, that young people are still suffering in conditions that undoubtedly are damaging to their health and to their development. The scars inflicted by these torturous conditions may remain with them for a lifetime. Punitive segregation must be ended. That does not mean that the variance requested by DOC is acceptable. It is very disappointing that once again, the Department of Correction has proposed a variance request that was made available to the public only shortly before this meeting and with very few details. When there was ample opportunity for the secure units to be discussed with the Adolescent and Young Adult Advisory Board, members of that board have repeatedly asked for the directive so that we could understand it and discuss it, and certainly the information that was provided here could have been provided to that board and was not. Various JAC members will discuss different concerns with the plan. I will focus on the complete lack of facts supporting the reduction of out-of-cell time from 14 to 10 hours. DOC claims that the 10-hour reduction is a critical management tool and is needed so as not to seriously compromise the safety and security of staff and incarcerated people. Yet the variance letter does not explain how reduced lockout time achieves that aim. The variance request raises serious concerns that the secure units are just one more restrictive setting and a retreat from the meaningful elimination of punitive segregation for 18 to 21-year-olds in the jails. It's extremely concerning that the plan includes no limit on how long a young adult can be housed in a secure unit. Reviews of placement in the secure unit are held only every 28 days. The plan requires a minimum of consistent, satisfactory behavior. Is that a fair requirement for young adults to be released from, to have reduced lockout time? There is a lack of information about who decides whether that requirement is met and how they make that assessment. There is simply no factual basis or policy explanation supporting the need to limit out-of-cell time in the secure units, and the failure to require advancement suggests that these secure units may be an endless placement in continuous restrictions. The board should not grant the limitation on out-of-cell time that's been requested, and the board should certainly not sanction the use of these units for 6 months without the details and the directive being provided. Thank you.
Natalie Block-Levin.
Good morning, and thank you for your time and efforts, everyone here. My name is Natalie, and I'm a member of the New York City Jails Action Coalition. I'm also going to talk in opposition of the variance, specifically about the lack of facts that are presented to understand the criteria and the process for placement in the secure unit, movement between phases, and how to get out of the secure unit. So the first question is about what the due process protections are and what will be provided to young adults before they are transferred to a secure unit. The letter mentions providing a due process hearing, but provides no information addressing the following points. What assistance will be provided to the young adult? What burden of proof will control? Who will make the decision? The chief mentions that there will be an appeal process, but we don't know the details of that. What the decision that will be made, whether there's placement or not, what is the exact decision? Is it going to be about the placement, or will there be additional sanctions included in that decision? If there are possible additional sanctions, what will they be? The next point I'd like to talk about is what procedures govern the 28-day review process. Is there assistance, burden of proof, appeal available? Who makes these decisions, and is there a presumption of advancements? Conditions on any grant of the variance request. So what will be required here? Like a specific due process protection that includes more than a paper review? Will there be a notice of facts or changes, a full hearing with necessary assistance in preparation for and during the hearing process, the right to attend, to make statements, to present evidence, to call and question witnesses? Require that specific findings must be proven by a preponderance of the evidence before placement into this new restrictive setting, and require written factual findings. Require that young adults are provided with specific information on how to advance between phases and out of restrictive settings, which, again, the chief did address some of that, but not the specifics. And the board should establish time restrictions on placement in each phase of the most restrictive secure units. And the board should require that the DOC identify specific criteria that distinguish between placements in second chance housing unit and transitional restorative unit and the secure units. And this variance should not be granted, permitting the DOC unfettered ability to place young adults into a new restricted setting and keep them there without time limit.
Thank you.
Kelsey Diavolo.
Good morning. I'm Kelsey. I'm the jail services social worker for Brooklyn Defender Services and a member of JAC. Today I'll be speaking about the lack of facts about physical design and access to minimum standards. And I also like to echo the statements of Jennifer Parrish and Natalie Black-Levin. So first off, what is the physical design of the secure unit? Are the housing areas of phase 1, 2, and 3 similar in design to one another? Are individuals separately housed depending on phase? Without answers, the board does not know the restrictiveness of the setting and should not grant this variance request. Next, what are the conditions of the secure unit? How is recreation provided? Is everyone in individual cages? Do cells have solid or barred doors? Are the young adults shackled during programming? How do young adults access phone calls? How will visits be conducted? How will the kiosk library replace a law library with staff and clerks to assist young persons with their questions about research and legal forms? What is the access to sick call? Is this included in the mandated services and programming that will be conducted in the unit? Is there space that is appropriate for confidential medical treatment? The variance may be permitting the DOC to recreate many of the same torturous conditions of punitive segregation under a different name. The board must not grant the variance in the absence of information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Riley Doyle Evans.
She's a professional, actually. She's employed by our office, Brooklyn Defender Services. She's not getting college credit for being here. So I hope that you can...
wasn't speaking with you, but all those questions were actually answered by Commissioner Ford.
Okay.
But that's beside the point.
It's okay, folks.
I don't even understand
Honestly, it's been an unusual day, what with testing and all, but one thing we're not going to have is dialogue across the room. Okay, please? That's it.
My apologies. Riley Doyle Evans, I'm the Jail Services Coordinator at Brooklyn Defender Services. There's a lot to say, and I'm sure I won't be able to say all of it, but, first of all, I just, I'm sorry that we're here to give comments in this setting. Those of us who have been on the Adolescent Advisory Board for a long time have been asking for months to look at the directive that's being drafted, to talk about the secure unit and what it's going to look like, what it's going to operate like, how this thing is going to get rolled out. And those requests haven't been responded to in a meaningful way. And so now we're here at the last minute trying to speculate about how this is all going to roll out. There's no need for that. What is the point? Yeah, just to start with that background, I think that it's a little bit difficult for us to comment in any meaningful way about what we think about this unit because our questions about it haven't been answered, and now we learn that even if our concerns were ignored, they're going to need even more time. So, you know, it may seem to some people like another 30 days of punitive seg is not a big deal, but for the young people that are in those units right now who are languishing in their cells 23 hours a day, it is a big deal, and these are real people, and we ought to think about that. On a few specific points, I just want to reference that we think that it's important that HHC and particularly mental health clinicians are involved with evaluating the individualized needs of the people that are placed in these units. These young people are obviously suffering with behavioral challenges, and we think that it's important that the people who are involved in their care are involved in the evaluations about whether or not they should be in the unit in the first place, whether or not they have conditions that should preclude them from the unit, and how their behavior relates to their success in this space. It will not be surprising when there's people who do not respond well to having more limitations put upon them when they've already had a hard time following jail rules in the first place, much like the RHU. On one comment that, you know, just, and we saw this presentation today from the department that we should have seen at the advisory board months ago. You know, one of the things that I find really troubling and hard to imagine is how young people are going to be eager to participate in programming in a new unit that they've been put in, where the first thing that happens to them is that pictures of their family are taken away from them. Right? I mean, these young folks have a hard time getting through life. That's why they're in the criminal justice system to a large degree. And so to expect them all of a sudden to turn around their behavior and participate adequately in programming that they might feel is actually a part of their punishment after they've been denied books, they've been denied pictures of their family, you know, I think we're setting ourselves up to fail here. And I appreciate the good intentions on the part of everybody here to end punitive segregation for this population. I think it's a noble goal, and it's one that we share. But to create something that, quite frankly, is, you know, we're not talking about a unit that's going to be a temporary placement for people. If somebody is perfect in this unit, they get out after 84 days. Most of the young people that we work with, our clients, are locked up for less than 84 days. So you're talking about people who are going to go in, they're going to have trouble when they get into the jail, and they're going to end up there for the whole time that they're there. And Commissioner Pont referenced that TRU is not going to be where people go, and SCHU is not going to be where people go after they're done in this unit, that there might be an additional step down to this unit. So we're talking about 84 days, 3 phases that you have to get through in this unit, and then another step down. What's the step down? How long does that last? I mean, we're talking about, you know, maybe we're talking about a relatively small number of people, but we're talking about locking them up in restrictive units for the whole time that they're in. And I think we ought to be very serious about the fact that even if you don't call it punitive segregation, and even if people get more out of cell time, this is a serious, serious implication for our clients and for the people that we're all frankly responsible for. These are young New Yorkers. We all, I mean, even if we're only self-interested, these are going to be our neighbors. They're going to come home to our communities, and we all ought to be concerned about it. So I hope that you consider very carefully the slippery slope that we're going down, and you know, hold the department to task on this one, because the fact that we're commenting on this at a board meeting on a variance that we're getting a week before, and then, you know, some draft conditions that we're getting basically the night before, I mean, this is, what is the point of all of the, you know, sort of openness to comment that the department purports to have? It's just not true. Thanks.
Thank you.
Charlotte Pope.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Pope, and I'm from the Children's Defense Fund, New York. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment. I submitted a letter yesterday, and I agree with the points that have been previously brought up. While we strongly support the elimination of punitive segregation for 18 to 21-year-olds, we do not understand how this variance can be voted upon without a directive. If the board does choose to vote today, we ask why the variance must be approved for the full 6 months. As of now, it is unclear what the criteria for placement in the secure unit is exactly and how the criteria for second chance, true, and secure are different from one another. Earlier, a few categories were mentioned quickly. Otherwise, that information isn't being shared publicly. We do appreciate and agree with the draft conditions, and while those do include a requirement that the directive provide a description of admission criteria, we ask that an addition be made to report on the frequency with which each of the admission criteria is used to justify placement in the secure unit. While we have other concerns, it is difficult to fully comment without a directive, but according to the variance, and this was just brought up by the board, young adults can be held in the secure unit indefinitely. We support the conditions monitoring the minimum, maximum, medium, and average length of stay in each phase, but we hope that time restrictions can be placed on each of the 3 phases. Further, the only tool to move out of the unit appears to be the 28-day review process, but what will reviews look like, and why must they only happen every 28 days? We ask that the board instead allow for the continuous review, or at a minimum more frequent review, of young adults placed in the secure unit to better enable their immediate removal to the least restrictive environment. The approved January 2016 limited variance to extend the young adult strategy plan contained the condition that the department submit to the board a written assessment of the piloting of the secure unit. The word pilot does not appear in the variance request, and we would appreciate further clarification on the intended future of the secure unit and what the expectation is following the 6 months that was requested for the variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Masters of the Public Advocate Office. Office of the Public Advocate. Amanda.
Good morning. The public advocate was not able to be here today. She's in court, but I'm going to read her comments for her. The work the board has accomplished to improve conditions for young adults and adolescents is critically important, and we commend the board for that. We look forward with hope for an end to solitary confinement for the young adults on June 1st. But the public advocate urges the board today to add another vote to the agenda and to vote today to publish the proposed PREA rule and schedule public hearings under CAPA so that the public can review the proposed rule. More than a year ago, public advocate Letitia James petitioned the Board of Correction to initiate rulemaking under the city's Administrative Procedures Act, CAPA, to implement PREA, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and to create more and better programming and trauma-informed services for women in detention, such as rape crisis center services on site. On June 9th, 2015, 2 months after our petition, the Board of Correction voted unanimously to engage in rulemaking. We applauded that vote. It was the right thing to do. That was almost a year ago. BOC board members and staff have had many meetings with experts and stakeholders and the Public Advocate's Office, and the agencies have had a year to engage in the process. It is past time to publish proposed regulations and open the process up to the public. We need public hearings on the draft regulation, and we need them now. Women, men, and teenagers subjected to the risks of sexual abuse in our jails are waiting for action.
Thank you. That concludes the public comment period. Let me tell the board that my effort at being pragmatic and practical about the time question relative to the ending of PS has proven to be misguided, and we cannot pursue that approach to dealing with additional time to allow for the parallel operation of, in a limited way, of PS and of the newer piloted approaches. That means we will have to consider the June 1st date at a later date, and we'll have to confer about how to address that. That brings us back to the limited variance request by the department, and I'm going to put that forth in order to begin focused discussion of the proposal. I'm going to put that forth as a motion. The department's application for a variance, and if I could have a second, we could begin the discussion.
Second.
Thank you. Judge Hamel has
I'd
seconded it.
like to amend the motion.
Okay, so you have to propose the amendment, and that too must be seconded and discussed before the main. Don't ask me why, but that's Robert's Rules of Law.
Well, since we're now being asked to set up, to continue another unit for some indefinite period, and to set up another restrictive unit, I think that the amendment that I propose are, one, that this variance be limited to 2 months, so that in 2 months we can understand what is going on, and not give the department 6 months to figure this out. I understand that they have as much interest in anybody else in getting this done as quickly as possible. I absolutely believe that, but I don't think the board, given the current situation, should give 6 months without having a chance to review what is happening in this unit. That's part of my amendment.
Oh, well, why don't we just to make it easier.
Let me just say what. Yeah.
Well, I'll come back to you. I just want to stick with the timing for a minute, if we could do that. So let me just note that there's generally no board meeting in August. So perhaps you could make your focus your amendment on the September board meeting.
Or we could do it in July, I guess.
Well, July would be essentially a 1 month. Variance.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 months from now. Yeah.
But it's,
right,
the
so
variance begins June 1.
That's right. Well, the variance begins now, right? They can set up the secure unit whenever they want.
They can operate now until June 1, so we're giving them relief, whatever relief we
I think we should see in July rather than September what's going on. And then the second, another component of it is that we should have a directive for the unit by our next board meeting, so we can understand exactly what the elements of it are.
Two amendments.
One more, and that the maximum time in the unit should not exceed the amount of time that someone would be sentenced based upon their infraction to a restricted unit. So that someone who hurt a correctional officer seriously could have 60 days in this unit. Someone who has possession of tobacco could have a maximum of 30 days in this unit.
So we have 3 different amendments. I'm going to treat them as 3 amendments. So I need a second for each of the amendments. Let's start with your first amendment, Bob, is proposed to give relief on the variance until the July board meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, it would be to July, but I would accept a variation in that to 3 months.
To the September board.
Yes, to the September meeting. Yes.
Okay, can I have a second?
Yeah, I second that.
Any discussion of that amendment?
So I'm seeking clarification to better understand that, given the paragraph 3 of the variance is currently stated, speaks to the progress reports that must be provided. So I'd like further information about what you'll be looking for that would just justify the time limit on the variance, given what is in paragraph 3. as well as in paragraph 2.
Yes, well, I think, it's
I'm just
important that we
wondering.
receive, we did, in initial response, ask that we get reported on a regular basis, this kind of information, but I think we should take the opportunity that in September we will have some information, and based upon that, we'll make a decision about continuing the variance or not.
So you're fine with the information requested in paragraphs 2 and 3, you just want to limit the time?
Yes, and then we can, yes, I want to limit the time that we give them the variance, so that we have a chance to reevaluate whether this is going in the right direction or not.
And you're also saying that the parameters, the programmatic parameters in terms of how long people stay in there should follow the rule on punitive seg in terms of
Yes.
sentences in that, right?
That's right.
Well, it's three, again, that's a separate amendment. And by the way, I should have asked my seconder if she was willing to consider this amendment. I neglected to do that. But let's just focus on the time frame and see if we can put that aside. I'm going to ask the department, would the department find it onerous or impracticable to accept essentially a 90-day variance as opposed to a 180-day variance? It's okay? All right. So I'm gonna ask for a vote on essentially
Jeff, can you clarify that?
September. September.
It says no, okay.
September.
We don't think it's prudent to run until September. We do need the 6 months to have it. As I actually told the judge in a separate conversation, just in the first, to stand it up, to make sure that treatment plans are in place, people are given the opportunity to kind of go through those therapeutic plans. The point of it is to run it for a bit, to actually identify what alternatives we may have to make to this. And this is what we're setting as our initial kind of alternative. We've developed alternatives to punitive segregation. We started off with second chance, it's true. We tested those things. Here is a new model that we've never tested before, and we need the time to actually evaluate. Part of the idea of running this for 6 months is to allow for both the treatment plans to be put in place, the movement of people who are not just in punitive seg right now into this housing unit, but also then think about those people who would potentially infract after we ended punitive seg. What do we do then? And so this isn't just trying to address the population that's in punitive seg right now. It's trying to address potential problematics that come at a later time, once we actually end punitive segregation. To think that potentially within 3 months, we knew that even asking for the 6 month, we would probably have to come forward and give progress reports per agreement on the changes to the variance to report out on these things. Then we would have to come and talk to the board about where we were, how this was working. We need that time to kind of evaluate this. So I think the 3 months is not enough.
So to summarize, you're saying that the 3-month period would not allow sufficient time to develop, generate, and analyze the information so that there was anything substantive, sufficiently substantive to report on to the board to allow for consideration of extension, that the cause would not have been advanced in any way and the information would not be there.
Yeah,
Judge Hamill?
So I'm going to address my comments sort of broadly, but also to Bobby's amendment here. First of all, I want to thank the advocates who have come forward and spoken today. I know we very much appreciate your comments. And again, I find it regrettable that at the adolescent young adult board meetings that the department convenes bi-weekly, this information has not been shared with you. I know when we had this conversation back in January, we were assured that the advisory board would be utilized that way. A lot of expertise, I believe where we are right now, could have been avoided had you been utilized the way that it's really been set up. So I very much appreciate that. However, some additional information I would like to share since I've been able to speak with many, many people on this particular issue. It's my understanding, I don't know whether any of the members of the monitoring team and the subject matter experts are present, but it's my understanding, as with True and Shoe, the monitoring team and their subject matter experts will be working with the department on the draft directive as well as the Board of Correction. We have not received that as well. It's also my understanding that nothing like this has ever been done in the country, and that this is a pilot, and the department would need the variance to be able to pilot it and to tweak it, but the only variation they're asking for is from the lockout as well as the legal. It's also my understanding, and one of the main reasons I've been supportive of it is because I believe it is the only way they can end punitive segregation, and we have agreed as a board to regulate all the restrictive units. So this information would be gathered for purposes of us monitoring compliance with their own plan, as well as providing us the information regarding our own rulemaking in the future, which could determine you don't need 10 hours minimum or lock-in. It could be 14 hours. So I am in support of the 6-month. I think it's regrettable we didn't have the additional information about possibly not being able to end punitive seg, but I am in support of the 6 months because this is a pilot. They're telling us they can't just automatically open the doors to punitive seg and allow them out for 14 hours. We saw they had some trouble with True. They were violating the standards. It took months to get them in full compliance. And I appreciate the candor of the commissioner and his team that this is what they feel that they need at this time. I think 3 months is too short a time. I'm in support of 6 months, but that's also under the condition that we really are going to be ending punitive seg within like a 30-day. I don't want to see that there's going to be a 6-month trial of punitive seg and secure, and I think that that's probably a great concern of the advocates and the board.
Any additional comment on the time frame for the variance?
Yeah, just Jeff, your comment on the 6 months being necessary to evaluate the program actually makes sense to me. Concern I have, though, is in my experience on the board, most of the relief that we've granted the department has always been extended. So if you ask for 6 months, it may turn into 9 months or a year. My interest in supporting the 3-month is which I would expect to be extended as well. So we end up with 6 rather than 9 or a year. So, and I do think 6 months some appropriate arguments you made in that regard. But, my fear is that 6 months will end up being a year if we don't have some kind of a shorter point at which we all have to reevaluate it and extend it if we find it necessary. So that's why the 3-month was appealing to me.
Further comment on the time frame issue?
For me, given the progress reports that are required as part of the variance, I have greater confidence that we can sit and discuss these issues as the program is being rolled out, it's being further developed and rolled out. Having, as I've said many times before, been on the inside of government and appreciating what it takes to change something dramatically in the fashion that you are attempting to do, I'd rather not waste time coming back in 3 months trying to extend it for another 3 months, but rather take the time out to look at what's happening and make the adjustments as are necessary. So I would vote in favor of the 6 month.
Any additional comment?
Yeah, I want to weigh in on that as well. Having worked in corrections for a long time, these things take time. And my main concern is safety of staff, safety of the other inmates in this population. And yes, we're dealing with a group of young men and women who are in precarious positions. But safety is paramount. And I don't want to come back in 3 months and start debating this and discussing this again. Give it 6 months. Give them some time to put the program together. I'm new at this, so, you've gotten extensions before, but, these things take time.
They do.
That's the reality. And if you're going to do it right, and if you're going to do it safe, you got to have that time. And I'm in support of the 6 months. I really am. We're talking about summer months, too. And, people on vacation and things that happen, so, give it some time. My thing here is staff. I want them to be protected, too. That's my biggest concern. The inmates are concerned, no doubt about it. The offenders, sure. But let's make it safe for everybody. And let's give it some time.
Any additional comment on the time frame?
Yeah, I'm going to support the 6 months. I think 6 months so we could see whether the program works is fair. For me, the more important amendment is the second amendment that we're going to deal with respect to time people can spend in this program. So I can support the 6 months.
All right, I'm going to call the question. An affirmative vote essentially would be to reduce the time frame to 3 months. A negative vote would be to continue as is in the proposal from the department, the 6 months. So affirmative 3, negative 6. All those in favor of 3 months, please raise your hand. There, I think it's 2, right? All those in favor of 6 months? 6 months carries, so that amendment is rejected. The second amendment, which either Bobby or Stanley should state so we can begin discussion on that amendment. Bobby, would you mind restating it?
Yes, that the maximum time that someone could be kept in under, kept in the secure unit under our variance, which means less than 14 hours. You don't need 14 hours in the secure unit to, if you're there for 14 hours, there's no need for a variance. For those who are going to be kept in the secure unit for less than 14 hours, that not be beyond the sentence that they would have gotten for the instant infraction.
So before I open it up for discussion, and I'm just going to assume a second for it, I'm going to ask the department to respond to that so that our discussion can be informed by the department's view of it. Are you in a position to respond?
Yeah. One comment that I'd actually ask.
And perhaps if you could go to the mic, Jim.
So 2 comments by me, and then I'll actually have Dr. Adams speak. The first is simply that, like we did with RMDC, and one of the changes we specifically made is, once we end punitive seg, we are not going to infract with days in punitive seg. There will not be a record of whether or not a person is earning 30 days of punitive seg or 20 days of punitive seg. Once we end it, there will be no record. There was not going to be a minimum stay because we are moving towards a therapeutic kind of model for handling these tough conditions. I'll let the doctor speak more about that, but part of the reason why there isn't a time limit is it's determined on the individual by the treatment team in a combined effort by DOC, H&H, and other people who are coming in to deal with that particular person's issues.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Nicole Adams. I am the Deputy Commissioner for Health Affairs, and I'm a board-certified bilingual licensed psychologist. And prior to taking this role, I actually worked with Corizon and then H&H as a clinical supervisor in the GRVC PACE unit. I was a clinical supervisor for the mental observation units at GRVC. I cross-trained in AMKC, Rosie's, RMDC, and GRVC, and I opened the PACE, the Forensic Psychiatric Assessment Unit that's currently running at AMKC, and then I do coverage for the other acute care units. So when we talk about the secure unit specifically, it has been a very thoughtful process where we're looking at how treatment can really guide behavioral change. And that's one of the reasons why we have the program counselors working in conjunction and supporting the work that H&A is doing. We have such a strong collaboration looking at how we really need the guidance and support of evidence-based research that talks about how do you really affect change in a long-term way. So when we talk about, there was a question previously that was talked about, where did the 28 days come from? Why is it 28 days? That number seems very arbitrary. In a behavioral treatment model, you need 20 days of consistent therapeutic treatment to really affect change. And given that our population is so problematic, especially in the secure housing, we want to not only give them the opportunity to benefit from that change, but then to also make sure it's going to stick. We want to really give people that opportunity to look at, is this real, what's the cause of the maladaptive behavior? Why is somebody really having a difficult time? what might be a reason why a person is engaging in such violent and aggressive behavior. And in these units, there's not only are there daily meetings where we're talking to correctional staff, we're talking to the behavioral health staff on the unit, talking about the different patients that are there and what are we doing to guide their treatment and practice. But then there's also weekly treatment plan reviews that are happening. And it's those treatment plans that are created in conjunction with mental health that will determine if somebody is going to stay or if they're going to move off the unit. So I just wanted to, I saw that you were nodding your head, I don't know if you want me to stop speaking, but I just wanted to give a little bit of context to what we're doing because I heard the advocates' concerns. I really think they do need to be a part of these conversations, and I'm happy to meet with you, and I'm happy to make sure we have these discussions. I heard some social workers in there. I love social workers. But I feel like we need to really partner together because it is the collaborative effort that has made the PACE units so successful. It's that ongoing dialogue and discussion weekly where somebody that was previously very violent and very aggressive, after being passive for 30 days or after being passive for 60 days, all of a sudden, with that consistency in treatment, we see somebody expressing a little bit of interest. And that's very exciting for us because not only for the patient that we're working with, it may be the first time that they've had success with supports and with resources in place. So I understand people really want firm times and firm deadlines, but we really have to let our evidence-based treatment guide what's happening next. And we like to give ourselves kind of ballpark times to let that work happen. But for some people, this is the first time that they will have ever been successful. Many people, you know, conflict and violence is the norm. So when you talk about affecting that change, making a behavior that was normal for you previously that isn't accepted by society something different, there's time, you have to cultivate it, and you want to make sure those successes continue not only on the unit, but also after they leave. And also when you talk about transitioning somebody that was in a punitive segregation environment, someone mentioned about changes that happen to the body, to the mind. We know that's evidence-based, but you don't want to necessarily put somebody in that environment without appropriate transitions and supports in place to make sure they're set up for success. Make sure you're teaching them what are appropriate skills. How do you communicate appropriately? How do you resolve conflict appropriately? What are the things that you need to be successful so that you can have a kind of a day-to-day success and celebrate those successes with the person? So that's the reason why in this unit we do have built in the daily meetings with staff, the weekly treatment plan review meetings, and then the more formal monthly meetings where we talk about movement off the unit. But those things can be changed and can be dictated by the treatment plan that we create in conjunction with the H&H staff that are our experts on that behavioral health piece on the unit that are there every day.
Stan. I just wanted to say, it sounds to me very similar to what's being done in the Second Chance in the True. It's a little bit different, but there's treatment team meetings. And my experience, and as I've told the commissioner's team, my experience is that those are very effective and you're moving the young people out of Second Chance and True as quickly as it is safe to do. So I trust when you come up with these time frames, it's because, and I accept what you say, but also that the treatment team meetings will be occurring, that there'll be input as to when the young adults are ready to move as well. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So in that situation, someone could be in secure and move out before the 28 days as a result of the weekly treatment plan reviews and the progress assessments?
No, we'd like to give them 28 days. We want to make sure.
So minimum, they're going to be there 28 days.
28 days. And even if they're there and super successful, we want to celebrate those successes and reward the person and give that really good positive reinforcement. We are so happy you're doing so well. You know, keep up the good work, because we want to see consistency. We want to make sure that individuals are really set up for success. So when they progress to the second stage, it's a celebration, but we know that people aren't going to regress. Because also, if you do very well, and then you're not really ready for the transition, and you kind of, because people are going to regress again, you know.
But even though you said the literature says 20 days is sort of the dosage threshold to bring about change, right?
Yes,
so even with those 20 days, you're saying after the 28 days, then they go into another 28 days, and it's because we want to celebrate their success.
What we want to do is we're doing kind of like a graduated exposure to the full-time amount to make sure we're setting people up for success. So that is correct. It's an evidence-based way to maintain that positive behavioral change.
I think the contextual question here, as I understand what Stanley and Bob have raised, is to be as certain as we can be that the therapeutic model dictates that it doesn't morph into or demonstrate punitive elements without the associated protections that existed in the punitive setting. So one of the things I guess we're going to be interested in as a board is is how the department is going to assure, monitor, evaluate the effectiveness and the thoroughness of the therapeutic approach and the avoidance of slipping into something that is punitive and contrary to what the intent is, I'm sure, and to what the board would countenance. Is that fair, Ron? What I just described?
And also, how easy is it going to be for the inmate himself or herself to understand that this is a therapeutic exercise and not a punitive exercise? I mean, we all may say, and the doctors and the professionals may say, oh no, this is not punishment, this is therapy. But if the inmate doesn't see it that way, how successful is this likely to be? And if you do have any experience in that kind of a question.
Yes, so they definitely will see it as punitive initially still. I say that from experience from opening my units. I opened those units and I had the most problematic inmates there. And when we really started this therapeutic approach, you know, the language is foreign to a lot of people. There's a lot of cultural things that speak into being in a therapeutic program and the stigma attached to it. So the ongoing continual education is critical. And that's one of the reasons why the partnership with H&H is so fundamental in making it successful. Not only does it holds us to task of making sure we're doing the good work, but it also maintains the integrity of the actual work project itself. So what I found, I can talk specifically from my experience about starting that educational process, is that number one, like the judge had mentioned before, the facility is beautiful. The space is beautiful. And when people are in an environment that looks better, feels better, therapists tend to be very nice, this is a very therapeutic space, it doesn't feel like punishment in the same way. What I found from the other units that I worked on and that I helped open is that even though people know they're there for a therapeutic purpose, because that education is a part of it, they want to be there after a while when they understand that the treatment is really helping them. That's what we talked about when we have those measured successes and keeping somebody there and celebrating those successes. They understand, like, wow, I'm doing well, I'm working towards a goal, and I'm doing well in this environment with these kind of supports. Another big piece of this unit, which we're very excited about, is we actually have the opportunity to partner with the community on the outside. So that way, when people have these resources available to them, and they understand this is what helps them be successful. You know, we're thinking about after you get out, like when you're in the community again, how do you find those same resources that we had here to help you become successful? So I definitely feel like your points are incredibly valid. I think it's so important that we maintain the integrity of what we're doing, true to the spirit, but also the evidence-based behavioral work that needs to happen, and those partnerships with our community partners, with our different advisory boards, and also with H&H are just really important in making sure it happens the way that we're planning it today.
Right, thank you, Dr. Adams. The PACE units I'm very impressed with. This is not a PACE unit. The PACE unit, people are put into PACE units because they have serious psychiatric illnesses. People are not being placed in a restrictive housing area because of their psychiatric illness here. I mean, I hope that there is there's an effective interaction with H&H. We haven't heard anything about. I haven't heard anything about that yet, and I'm on the board. So maybe some other people have, but there's nothing that we've seen with that. I look forward to that. I think it's a good idea. Let me just finish, please. But it is a clearly punitive unit if we have a board rule that says you get 14 hours a day out of your cell, and then if you commit an infraction, which is the only way you get into this unit, and you can be kept potentially forever for failure to participate in the program 10 hours a day without pictures of your family. For example, the departments, own, I understand you can modify that, but that's what you gave us as your notion of what this unit is going to be like. I don't see why the board should be approving a change that says that people can, who through a due process have violated a significant rule, should be not having their rights restored after a period of time which should be limited. You can talk about it being a therapeutic unit, but it's clearly a punitive unit when you're cutting down from 14 hours to 10 hours. You are asking us to create a unit which is restrictive, just like you did in ESH. Now they're making and we are sort of in agreement to do that, but I don't think we should be doing that for an extended period of time. And we only do that as part of a model which recognizes that that you believe that you need to have a punitive element to it. So I don't think your analogies, this is to the board, I don't think your analogies to the PACE units are relevant here right now. These are people who are being placed in this unit because they do not participate well in the rules, not because they have an Axis 1 diagnosis. And I don't see why the board should be saying that people can stay in a unit with 10 hours a day if they do not have any further infractions for an unlimited period of time. So I'm speaking to the board.
May I respond?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to hear you, yeah.
The clarification point would be, all of the each PACE unit has a different cohort, right? So there's one that are for, they all have the seriously mentally ill designation. The one unit is for the...
And these people will not have SMI, right? They'll be excluded from this unit.
That's correct. And the one, though, is for the individuals decompensating, going to the hospital, which is what you referred to. We have a hospital step-down unit, which is our Bellevue returns. But the other was for those individuals that engage in severely problematic behavior, violent and aggressive behavior, and we're not necessarily in the same criteria as the other ones. They're inappropriate and violent behavior. These are the patients that came to us from the problematic inmate meetings more often than not, and it engaged in this very serious, violent, aggressive behavior. So we actually had patients in that unit that we took from PSEG environments to provide treatment. But because we said something is causing this violent and aggressive behavior, this was the assessment unit. So the PACE units are a little bit different as far as differentiation, but I do agree with you. Anytime we're limiting hours, it is punitive. It is. I mean, that's kind of by nature of the definition that it was taken.
Okay. I mean, what I'm suggesting does not prevent you from having a program where people can have their rights restored, but it just says that we can't do this going on forever, which we just got to. I think that's an issue. Right?
Can we move to the vote?
Well,
For the amendment?
to tell you the truth, I don't know that we've got we're looking for a handle, really, on how this evaluative process is going to proceed individual by individual, and a judgment, implicit or explicit, as to how long they stay in this circumstance, and we don't really know that, right?
We do know now. It's 28 days before they can be moved.
Right.
No, it's
We don't
actually
even know
84 days.
We don't really know what happens at that point, what the review is like, and I guess we would all like to know more about how this is going to work in continuous and periodic review, and the individual is going to want to know about progress, what the possibilities are, and the like, and we don't know about that either. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think what Bobby's item, and I don't mean to speak for you, Doctor, was not about that. I think it was about a maximum amount of days.
Right.
But the maximum amount of days ties to an evaluative process, at least in this model.
Right. One of the letters that we got suggested that the evaluative process not occur at 28 days, that it could occur at 7 days, that it could occur at 14 days, that this model could be modified.
No, it actually occurs every week. They said there's a weekly review.
There's a minimum of 28 days. However, we are
you can't be taken out of this level 1 until for 28 days. So the review for your placement does not occur until 28 days.
But it's an ongoing discussion. Like, so, week 1, if the person's doing very well, they're in compliance, they're following all the rules, we say, wow, he's doing really well. I mean, that's in consideration of the first 28-day review. Like, those kinds of discussions have to happen.
And if you go
So
from
can
28
somebody get out at 28 days?
No, there's a minimum of 28 days.
Well, what about extending the lockout during the first 28 days if they're doing well as an incentive? Is that permitted, or do you have to wait until tier 2? Because some of the fleshing out of the tier information was provided really today.
So the main focus is that the phases allow for an entire housing unit to be within the same, so that the lockouts can happen the same as opposed to one person gets 12, one person gets 10 within one unit. That wouldn't work. So from an operational standpoint, having the phases allowing kind of progression through specific units and phases.
I just want to interject something here. Maybe I'm a little confused, okay? We've just talked about extending, you guys giving, under 6 months is a reasonable amount of time to look at this program. But yet now we're going to try to put parameters on days and the units. I think we should let you guys tell us what works. Let it work a little bit. Let it pilot it before we start making decisions here and try to micromanage your program. Okay? I think it's fair enough to let you guys tell us what works, and then we go from there.
And
That's how I like to see it.
And we could mandate that during this period of the variance, we would have continuous discussion, review with them how in fact things are working, what they're learning, and what, if any, additional individual protections might make sense within that therapeutic. So
Excuse me for interrupting, but there are definitely going to be differences because this is a punitive unit. It's not like the PACE units. In that way, it is different. So it would be helpful to be able to have ongoing inspections about what's working, what's evolving, and as we pilot this and see, we may have to make small modifications to make sure we're keeping staff safe and we're keeping the inmates safe.
Mike.
I think that's what some of us have our heads wrapped around. We've had another, I can't speak for everybody here, but we're not mental health experts. But we've listened to mental health smart people tell us about the dangers of leaving children in punitive settings. So I don't mean to be speaking for Dr. Cohen, but I think I understand what he's trying to, and I agree with him, that there should be some maximum amount of time that we have here. Because heretofore, there were children in this setting for a long time.
So, anyone else? So, perhaps, Paul, this is an amendment that you might want to withdraw for this moment in time, you and Stanley, for further discussion at some early subsequent meeting on the basis of additional information that we might get. Would that be okay?
Say that again, Stanley, I'm sorry.
That we not consider the specific amendment at this moment, that we allow for the generation of more information and analysis and some informal discussions that would go on, individual board members, committees, and the department and staff, and that at some early subsequent date, we'd revisit this discussion based on the additional information and analysis and knowledge?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, so that's the second amendment. And Bob, I've lost track of what the third amendment was.
The third amendment was asking for a directive. Brianne pointed out to me that the variance request does require that a directive be provided to the board prior to the opening of the unit, which is inconsistent with everything else that I've heard today about how this unit is going to, in terms of a directive, I mean, that you're going to be trying things out. But I guess there will be a directive which will say exactly what you're doing, which I think in the future should be part of request for variance of the board, that we receive a directive so we know what you're planning on, what you're asking us to do. But Brian has included in that, so I withdraw.
Okay. So now I'm going to return to the proposal. Any additional discussion on the proposed variance? If not, I'm going to call the question. All those in with the understanding that we will return to the other question of PS, June 1st, et cetera, probably at a subsequent meeting. So all those in favor of the variance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Which variance?
The original variance as
Original
proposed, the
variance.
six.
I thought we vote that after the conditions.
We have to go through each
We have to
condition.
go through the conditions
Oh, okay, that's
first before
true,
we
that
can
is
vote
true.
that.
So we have, now, perhaps we need to review the conditions
Right,
again.
exactly.
Okay? Who's going to do that?
I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
So, I would at this time move, and I understand from our general counsel, we have to vote each condition separately. So this is the first condition, and let me just preface all these conditions that I had a meeting with Commissioner Pont as Chief of Staff, and it's my understanding they have agreed to all of these are the conditions, and these are conditions that I would be recommending are necessary if we're going to grant this variance. The first is during the pendency of this variance, the department shall, A, provide all young adults housed in secure units with a minimum of out-of-cell time, 10 hours per day, except for instances of de-escalation, the parameters of which shall be set forth in the department's written directive concerning the secure units. B, provide all young adults with due process in connection with their placements in secure unit. And C, exclude all young adults with serious mental or serious physical disabilities or conditions from placement in the secure units. It's the first condition.
So I'm going to treat that as a motion. I'm going to second it. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of that condition, signify by raising your hand. I can see unanimously passed. Mike is not here. 8 votes in. Okay. Second condition.
So I would move the second condition to be a condition of the variance, and that is 2, during the pendency of this variance and before the assignment of any young adults to the secure units, the department shall provide the Board of Correction with a directive which shall include a detailed description of A, the specific due process protections that each young adult will be provided in connection with this placement in secure. That's including written notice stating reasons for placement, a hearing, ability to submit a written statement, call witnesses and present evidence, hearing facilitator if necessary, burden of proof, written decision, post-transfer periodic review with advance notice of a review and ability to submit written statement. B, admission criteria, including the specific role that the Correctional Health Authority will play in the initial placement and periodic review process and the categories of young adults who will be excluded from secure units. C, staffing. It's in staffing ratios, steady posts, staff positions, specialized training units. D, security procedures, use of enhanced restraints. E, de-escalation parameters. F, the treatment of young adults owed punitive segregation time upon entering a secure unit. G, mandated and other services, including recreation, sick call, healthcare, mental health care, phone calls, visits, law library, education, commissary, and limitations on accessing them, whether recreation will be congregate or in individual cages, whether educational instruction will be provided in classroom or in cell. H, therapeutic and other programming. And I, a description of privileges that can be earned. That is a condition, moving that as a condition of the variance.
So that is a motion. I'm going to second it and open for discussion.
Just discussion. I was told at a meeting with the department on Thursday that there would be congregate recreation, that recreation will not take place in cages. This, I don't understand why I'm not sure exactly the language on here.
The language is, this is the directive, and they have to provide us all of this information.
But whether or not it's going to be in cages or not. But let me just ask the department, is it true that there will be all congregate and no cage recreation for the men in the secure unit?
There is no cage recreation.
Jackie, you're looking, you're not answering. That's it. There will be no cage recreation.
We've constructed it so,
No, I know you have. I just wasn't sure why this was in it. Okay.
No, actually, that's just a description the judge put in so that we can actually specify. It's not an indication of something that we are not doing.
Let me explain that. What we found with True and Shoe is they didn't put in each and every minimum standard, and it was compliance in that. So we want to make sure that they state in writing so we can hold them accountable to their policy. But it's my understanding it will be congregate.
I know. I just want to get
Any additional comment or questions? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the condition as moved by Judge Hamel, signify by raising your hands.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you. That passes. Condition 3.
Yes, the third condition I moved, this as a condition of the variance. During the pendency of this variance, the department shall provide the board with a monthly written assessment of its operation of secure units, which shall include the following information. A, the housing units from which young adults were transferred to secure units and number transferred from each unit. B, the number of young adults in secure units, phase 1, 2, and 3, and the minimum, maximum, medium, and average length of stay in each phase. C, the number of young adults participating in each therapeutic and other program. D, the number of young adults who subsequently released into Second Chance, TRU, or other housing unit, and the number released into each unit. E, the number of young adults who challenged their initial placement in secure unit and the number who were subsequently placed elsewhere. F, the number of young adults who received a periodic review and the number who were released from secure as a result of the periodic review. G, the number of young adults in secure units who were placed in de-escalation areas, including the minimum, maximum, median, and average length of time in each. H, the rates of violence in secure units in the young adult general population since implementation of the secure units. I, the rates of use of force in secure units in the young adult general population since implementation of secure units. J, the rates of acts of self-harm in secure units in the young adult population since implementation of the secure units. And lastly, that the department shall provide the board with its first monthly assessment by August 10th, 2016, and shall provide an assessment for each month thereafter on the 10th business day of the following month. In the event the department experiences difficulty in reporting on any item enumerated in A through J of this condition, the department shall provide the board with a written explanation of such difficulties.
So moved. I'll second it. Discussion? Pretty straightforward. Hearing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, conditions? Carried unanimously by those present. And I think, is there one more condition?
There's one final
Yes.
condition that I move. Number 4, during the pendency of this variance, the department shall continue to A, provide the board with a monthly progress report on its implementation of the young adult plan and implementation of alternatives to punitive segregation, which include Second Chance, True, and the Secures. And B, provide this progress report for each month on the 5th business day of the following month.
That's moved and seconded.
Second.
Okay, well, questions, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? No opposed, carried. And that brings us to the proposed variance request by the department, subject to the conditions that have already been voted. Any further discussion on that variance request?
Stan, I'd
Yes.
like to just say a couple more things. One, as you all listen to the conditions, I want to assure you that those conditions are meant to ensure, one, that these secure units operate as the department and the commissioner has told us he plans to do. Two, that they draft a comprehensive directive before opening it so we can review it, and I understand the monitoring team will be reviewing it. And 3, that they report to us so that we can monitor compliance with their policy and the effectiveness of the units. All of that is in keeping with the fact that the board intends to go into rulemaking on all of these restrictive units, including secure, so that if we become of the opinion collectively that 10 hours of lockout could in fact be 14 hours of lockout, then during rulemaking we can change that. So I want you to rest assured that these are pilots so that we can revisit the variance if it's necessary and or the context of this within rulemaking.
So I'm going to call the question on the variance request as modified by the condition amendments. All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. You got the count? All those opposed? Motion carries. We still have quite a lot to do on the agenda. We'll work through it as quickly as we can. I do understand that the leadership of the Department of Corrections may have to leave, but if some staff members could remain in case they're needed, that would, I'm sure, be adequate. So I'm going to return to the agenda and ask for the Executive Director update.
You guys can, I know you have to leave, so. Thanks, Stan. So I was gonna make my remarks brief anyway because we had a packed agenda. The first thing I want to talk about is the expanded planned budget for the board. And I want to just say how excited we are about the planned continued growth, which gets us to about a budget of $3 million, which is double what it was in fiscal year 15. And I want to thank all of our partners here in the room and those who are not here, as well as the Mayor's Office and the City Council for their commitment to a strong, active, and more effective board. I also want to point out that there's 3 new reports on our website, the first of which I guess we'll have the opportunity to talk about today, if H&H is here, which is a monthly report on medical and mental health access. That's in follow-up to our discussion from the March board meeting. There's also our first monthly report on visit restrictions now on our website, and that will be monthly moving forward. It goes through our responses on visit appeals as well as broad aggregate information about the restrictions that we're seeing among visitors and inmates each month. And then there's also another quarterly punitive segregation report on the website. Our June meeting, obviously punitive segregation will be a major focus of that meeting. The board's variance allowing the department to exempt people from 7 days out after 30 days in punitive segregation. That variance request will be up in June, so the board will be looking at that issue at the June meeting. And by June 1st, the department will be giving us a major report on violence reduction and the reduction of punitive segregation, and looking at the relationship between reducing prolonged stays in punitive segregation and reducing violence. That's really all I wanted to say. Oh, one more thing. Thank you, and the letters that we got this week, both, I guess, mostly around the variance. But I'm talking about one issue from the variance letters. Most of you noted that we didn't email the variance out, and I'm sorry if that sort of messed up people's responding time. It was not our intent to keep that a secret at all. We are trying to come up with a better system for communicating lots of changes on our website and new things that we keep there, including the agenda, including all of these reports. Until we have that system formalized and until we can announce that new system, we will email each variance. So thank you.
Is HHC still?
No.
No.
Is anyone from H&H here?
So I'm going to move the next two items to our next board meeting, right? Hopefully you get a progress report and see something. So I'll move items 4 and 5. Let me just say a word about PREA. First, I want to thank the Public Advocate's Office first for initially putting this issue front and center. We have been working quite diligently on PREA and associated issues. I think it's fair and accurate to say that as one digs into PREA, attendant, very important, even fundamental issues present themselves, and the board has been very focused on those issues, leaning very heavily on experts in the field, and including some of you represented in the audience, and the staff of the board has been working especially hard in consultation and investigation and research. Early on, we thought that we might be prepared to for this meeting today to have put out a proposed approach in the form of a rule. But as I say, the complexities are quite intensive, and our expectation now is that we will be coming to closure on what essentially would be a board proposed a rule before the June meeting. I do want to thank all of you and others who've been extremely helpful to us in this process. Personally, I have learned a great deal in this PREA-related process. Well, the next item is are two DOC items, Training Academy and the Visits Working Group.
Yeah, I wanted to speak on the DOC.
On the visits?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
And I thank you for allowing me to speak on the visit work group. About a year ago, some of the advocates had asked the commissioner to include the voices of the community in the process of rethinking about how visitors access Rikers, how visitors access and get engaged with their loved ones. And so we created, the commissioner asked Jeff to lead a work group focused on enhancing the experiences of families and individuals who are visiting Rikers. And I had the privilege of being part of that work group. I have 3 other advocates who have been part of that work group, Liz, Kelsey, and Tanya from the Osborne Association, where we've been meeting regularly to examine what's going on with the visit process, how we could enhance the process. And I've asked Jeff to speak to that today, and he had to leave, unfortunately. So he's not going to be able to speak to it. But I would like to ask the chair to put this issue, and the executive director, to put this issue on the standing agenda with requests from DOC to have them speak to the progress being made to the visit house. And I would ask some of my colleagues on the visit work group, when we get to public comment, to talk about their experience. Because I think we've been doing some work. We've been strategizing on how to enhance the experience. We've sort of moved 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. And there is some experience with respect to the new tables that have been put out, the new visit tables. I know Bobby raised it, and some of the advocates have raised it. But I'd like to have this be part of the public conversation about how this is being reformed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's it. So now we're going to move to the more general public comment period.
Just Stan, we'll have public comment, but I visited GRVC visit area recently, and we'll hear about the public comments. I found the tables disturbing, but the booth visit areas are terrible, and I would raise the issue to the department, I believe. They're scratched. You can't hear some people. It's very difficult to see people, and there were 2 to 4 foot separations between the person and the visitor on either side of the scratched plastic window, which made the situation really awful. And I was wondering if we had any improvement in that situation since Dr. Safri and I visited that about a month ago.
I'm not sure there's someone here from the department. I think we're going to ask the staff. I'm sorry.
I can't speak to that, but I can find out and get back to you or immediately after this meeting.
Appreciate that.
But in addition, I think we'll ask the staff of the board to take a look at it, and we'll put it on the agenda for discussion for our next board meeting.
Thank you.
For the public, the general public comment meeting, Camilla Newton.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna try to make this as quick as possible. Just talking about the last visit I had to Rikers. On Saturday, April 16, 2016, I attempted to visit my fiance and the father of my child, who was an inmate at Rikers. I set off an alarm in the Perry building, and I was sent to be searched. As I started to be searched, the observing captain, whom I've never seen before, she asked my age, and I was confused as to what made her ask that, as she was in possession of my ID at the time. Expecting her to say that I looked young or something of that nature. What followed was a verbal exchange which consisted of her yelling at me and screaming statements. As I answered her questions and asked why she was yelling at me, it ended with, "You can leave." She instructed me to wait out by the metal detectors for someone to return my ID. As she walked to the office to copy my ID, I asked her several times why I was losing my visit, and I've yet to receive a response. Someone came out and gave me my ID, and again I asked the CO why I was losing my visit. He responded something unintelligible and shrugged his shoulders, which I guess meant he was either unable or unwilling to help. But I didn't leave because no one had informed me of what I did to deserve to lose my visit. I asked the CO to tell me how I could file a complaint, and he consulted with another CO before telling me to look online. I asked for the badge number of the captain that unjustly revoked my visit, and he suggested that I wait until she comes back out of the search room. I attempted to get help from several COs, and no one was willing. She came out of the search room, and I asked her for her name and badge number. She covered her badge. She gave me a dirty look, and she continued walking. I saw another CO I recognized on his way out, and he asked me why I was sitting there. I told him what happened, and he was surprised that a captain would behave that way. He went into the captain's office. I saw the CO that revoked my visit leave with her jacket, and he came out shortly after to hand me a piece of paper. It was the report. I didn't even know that you were to get a report after you had your visits revoked. I read that she submitted my visitation for 45 days. I also read that she claimed I disrespected staff and refused to comply with rules and regulations, which was completely untrue. I responded to her questions each time she asked. On the back of the form, she claimed that I left before signing the notice, which was a lie, because I had the notice the same day that she made the decision. I think it's wrong for anyone in uniform to abuse their authority and deny my son the right to see his father, or for an inmate to see his main motivations to become a positive addition to society. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I've never felt so violated in my life. I have the right to be addressed in a respectable manner. I have the right to be informed of any offenses charged to me, and I have the right to the information I need to appeal any charges that I deem unjust, and all of these rights were denied. I think it's often that visitors find themselves being victim to whatever mood the correctional officers are in, and this is not the first time a CO was verbally abusive to me and is becoming a pattern. Prison is not only geared towards punishment, but also reform and rehabilitation, and data proves that the more visits the prisoners receive, the lower their chances of reoffending after release. So why deny such a major part of that? Yeah, I'd like the decision to be appealed and for the instance of the abuse and misconduct to be added to her record, and for all COs involved in the visiting process to be reminded of rules and regulations regarding the right to revoke visitation. I was punished for allegedly not following rules and regulations, but there's proof that she disregarded more than one rule as it pertains to the incident and it has no consequences. Even though the majority of the 45 days are almost over, I respectfully urge you to not allow this injustice to play all the way out and to do whatever in your power to make the visiting process as fair as possible. Thank you.
Just a comment, just to note that in 2016, the number of visit denials has been to date 996, and 4 years ago, when the population was substantially higher, there were only 445 visit denials.
That might be something that's put to the department directly in a question of
okay.
To comment on that rate of increase and give us some what their insight is into how and why. Okay.
Okay.
We should do that. Kelsey Diavolo.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to say thank you to our first speaker for sharing her story. And, it's unfortunate that the commissioner is not here. It's disappointing that he's not able to answer some of the questions and some of the things that we're about to share when it comes to visiting. There'll be a few of us from the Visit Working Group who will be sharing some of things that we've learned and things that have come up in our own professional area. So again, my name is Kelsey Diavila. I'm a jail services social worker at Brooklyn Defender Services. I'm here today to discuss visiting and the recent experiences of people visiting their loved ones on Rikers Island. For months now, many of us have witnessed DOC special search teams escort visitors off the MTA city bus, line them up and search them one by one by the K-9 unit, and return to the bus for a sweep. When you speak with officers on the ground, they report it's a random search, but as someone who visits every week, it's more than random. It's become an additional and regular humiliating search for visitors. A couple of weeks ago, I had to wait for DOC special search team and K-9 unit to finish searching the MTA city bus before I was allowed to leave the island. When I got onto the bus, I noticed a woman sitting nearby and crying. She bravely shared that when she arrived on the island, a dog alerted its handler and she was taken aside for a pat for a search, which she agreed to. During the search, she reported that an officer had her take off her bra and expose her breasts. When nothing of serious threat was found, she explained that she was on her period as a possible explanation for the dog alerting its handler. The officer then had her take out her tampon in an effort to prove that she was in fact on her period. She was completely devastated and there was no evidence of bringing any contraband. When she got to the visit floor, she was given a booth visit, and when she asked why she wasn't getting an in-person visit, she was told that because the dog alerted his handler, it was enough reason to flag her as a threat. On a separate occasion, I met a woman visiting her husband as well in Rikers. She shared that on a previous visit to Rikers, she brought her very young son who has autism. During the waiting period, her son reached out to pet a dog from the K-9 unit. Instead of a professional or sensitive approach at informing the mother and child on the risks of petting the dog, the officer only yelled and caused the child to cry. This woman said her husband would be getting out soon and vowed to never bring her son back. We're also hearing reports that more and more people are being given non-contact booth visits, but with questionable rationale for them being a serious threat to security. From more than one source, people have reported that if DOC finds contraband on an MTA city bus, even after announcing that anything left on the bus is considered amnesty, Everyone on that bus is given a booth visit. We've confirmed with DOC that this is absolutely not their policy, but truth of the matter is people who visit on different days and who have no connection to one another have reported the same story. People are being punished simply for showing up. What I'm sharing with you today is not one person's story, but a trend and a theme of inappropriate misuse of power and inexcusable treatment of visitors by DOC staff. To quickly assume that these stories are only claims and nothing more is immature and disrespectful to the thousands of visitors who pass through our New York City visit houses each year. Visiting has become more punishing than it is welcoming, and I'm deeply concerned for the safety of visitors when they go through DOC security. These stories speak to the immediate need for DOC to appoint regular supervisory roles for all visiting hours and for the board to have consistent and clear presence in and out of the central visit building and visit houses. It's become apparent that these actions taken by DOC staff members are not an accident or a mistaken protocol, but a continuous breach and ongoing serious threat to the safety of visitors. The board needs to be more involved on the ground and more involved in ensuring DOC officers are adhering to policy and not routine. Lastly, our office has received reports of family members appealing their non-contact booth visits and not receiving a response within an appropriate time frame. As a board, this is your responsibility, and we hope this is looked into and quickly absolved to prevent any further delay in people being able to visit their loved one. I thank you for your time, and we all look forward to seeing immediate steps taken on these issues.
Tanya Krupek.
Just a question, Heidi, is that that experience that Kelsey described about if the officers describe the bus as being amnesty and they find drugs on the bus, is it the policy of the department that everybody on that bus or everybody then gets a booth visit?
I would have to look back. I would have to go back to the department and just confirm what. I would just go back to the department and report back to the board.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a member of the Visiting Working Group. My name is Tanya Krupet. I'm the director of the New York Initiative for Children of Incarcerated Parents. It was 1 year ago, almost to the day, that DOC announced the formation of the Visiting Working Group, which was so exciting to me that standing here I invited myself to be on it. So we commend DOC for having the working group and are thrilled that there will be regular reports in these meetings. Of late, we have pushed for the working group to define its missions and set clear goals. As per the last meeting, DOC described the goal of the working group as to improve the visitor experience. There are many issues we could talk about, but I want to focus on the experiences of a large but invisible population of visitors, the close to 40,000 child visitors who visit Rikers each year. The Visiting Working Group has examined data from FY15 for child visitors or juvenile visitors, as DOC refers to children under 16, a term that should be changed. Sadly, the facility that receives the fewest child visitors is the women's facility, where more of its population are parents than in other facilities. The facility with the most children visiting is GMDC. GMDC has the highest volume of child visitors of any facility. During FY15, GMDC received 5,784 child visitors. Yet there is absolutely nothing set up to acknowledge this or attend to their needs. And now there is the plexiglass barrier. Last week, the 3 community members of the Visiting Working Group toured the visit house at GMDC to see the plexiglass. The reality of the 6-inch plexiglass divider as currently installed is this. Several rectangular tables placed side by side form one long, as you know, strip of a table with a long dividing plexiglass running down the middle. There are no signs stating that people can hold hands across this divider, nor any indication that a child can sit on the lap of their parent or family member. If I were visiting with a child or children, it would never occur to me that a child was allowed contact, nor would it occur to me to send my child by themselves down the line of visitors and into the row of back-to-back inmates so that they could climb on the lap of their dad. In this situation, if given the opportunity to do so, many children would be too scared. A handwritten sign also tells everyone to stay in their assigned seat or their visit will be terminated. A captain did share that babies are sometimes handed over the barrier. We spoke with DOC about signage and they are amenable to this, but raised the question of what the sign should say. The captain who was there did not think a child as old as 12 or 14 should sit on their parent's lap, and she was not aware of the rule to this effect. She also told us that officers are aware of visiting rules and will inform the visitors. This was not reassuring. She acknowledged that they received many child visitors, and she liked the idea of having a bin of books and coloring books and crayons that could be brought out. Just for history, back in 2008, Osborne partnered with the department at EMDC to provide coloring books and crayons in the waiting room. Children were allowed to bring the coloring book and set of 4 crayons into the visiting room with them and take them home. Fathers were approved to take back 1 page that their child colored for them, knowing how much this means to a child and how much it meant to the father to be able to look at this while sitting in his dorm or his cell. The children of all ages, including teens, the fathers, and the officers loved this. Something so simple kept the children occupied and happy, and the officers were relieved by the calm that resulted. DOC should bring this back at all facilities, and the visiting group is well poised to lead this effort. One additional item related to safeguarding children. DOC has reported an increase in visitor arrests. What happens when the visitor arrested has children with them? What do the children see and what happens to them? In 2014, the International Association of Chiefs of Police issued a model arrest policy to ensure minimizing trauma to children at the time of a parent's arrest. NYPD is adopting this, and we ask the department and the board to consider adopting it as well, to ensure that children are not further traumatized should their parent or guardian be arrested while visiting Rikers. In testimony to City Council yesterday, both DOC and BOC discussed significant increases in their FY17 budgets. I truly hope the department and the Board of Correction will invest in improving the visiting experience, the stated goal of the visiting working group. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
I'd just like to comment that I saw these, that I visited GRVC, saw a couple with their child. There was no way that the kid was going to be able to sit with the father. The family thought that if they put their hands over the barrier and held hands, that there might be risk to them of doing that. It was a very cold and sad experience, and I hope that the efforts that Stanley's talking about could make a difference. Currently, just try keeping your hand up like that for more than 2 minutes. It does not encourage visitation, which is the department's stated policy.
Liz Mayers? Or did I skip one?
Good afternoon. My name is Liz Mayers. I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition, aka JAC, and of the Visit Committee with Stanley Richards, Kelsey Davila, and Tanya Krupak. You've heard a lot about the kinds of things that we know continue to happen during the visits. We appreciated the formation of the committee about a year ago, and many smallish changes have been accomplished. We have worked very well with the department, and I'm really glad that we are now represented on the board. That'll make a big difference. Thank you, Stanley.
Thank you.
Our original goals, in general, were to shorten waiting time and make visits more family-friendly. However, I am frustrated because it feels as though some things have changed for the worst for visitors since we began working on the visit committee. Sometimes, as Stanley said, it seems like we're taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Having been surprised yesterday to learn of the new dog-sniffing visitor lineup, which represents an additional search on all the people who get off the bus, everybody, and having seen the plexiglass separators at GMDC, which children will not want to walk around even though allowed, I think that in some ways visits are harder than ever. As we go forward, we hope that no new surprises are in store that will make us feel we are going backwards. And now that we are represented on the Board of Corrections, we hope that you will be involved in assuring that visits, one of the principal tools for rehabilitation, will become less burdensome. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Natalie, Block 11.
Hi again, and thank you for your time. My name is Natalie, and I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition and a social worker. I was at the Q100 bus stop last week with a few of my colleagues, and I would like to relay some of the experiences that were shared with us, which speak to the aforementioned trend of inappropriate conduct happening during visits. We were there for about an hour and a half talking to people visiting loved ones at Rikers, and during that time, I met two women who told me about their experiences and a man who relayed his wife's experience. They all shared stories about having to expose themselves during the visiting process. One woman shared that she had to show the inside of her underwear. Another woman explained that she had to clench. All of the women had to expose their vaginas and breasts and had to consent to doing so if they did not want to be denied a visit or be given a booth visit. Two of them had booth visits regardless, and the man's wife did not want to come visit him again after that experience. Please be aware and acknowledge that this is happening and know that what women are going through when they visit their loved ones. Thank you.
I think this is Jane Stander. Did I mispronounce it so badly?
Jane left.
Oh, Jane left. Okay, not so badly. Zena Grandicelli.
Good afternoon or morning. My name is Zena Grancelli. I'm a movement building team leader, just one of them at SRLP, a prison advisory committee member, and a member of the Jails Action Coalition. I'm also a survivor of assault, physical, and being raped on the island from 2014 through 2015 over the New Year's. I'm also the one that was instrumental very much in the passing of the PREA Act by our United States Attorney General. And I'm still sitting here today and going to the meetings of Jails Action Coalition and talking to Stanley and a few other people within the corrections system. And I'm still miffed that the PREA Act has not been enacted on Rikers Island. I don't think that they should have any special circumstances on how they implement the PREA Act. I think that they should follow what the prisons are following and adhere to every single bit of that PREA Act, because they have no idea what we go through. Not only as detainees on the island, let's get that straight now, we're not offenders when we're on the island. We're not inmates. We're detainees because 90% of those on the island have yet to be sentenced. But yet, this putting off, prolonging, and not implementing this PREA Act is allowing this stuff to go on the island, which is atrocities towards people that are detained on the island waiting for court to find out whether they're going to go home or they're going to be sent upstate or whether they're going to do time on the island, or the visitors that come on the island that have to go through this type of thing. And I find it disconcerting that the commissioner and the top echelon of corrections always finds a way to get out of here early. They never sit through to hear about the PREA Act. They've always got to take secondhand back from their staff. And I'm a little tired of it. I don't know about anybody else that goes to the island or survivors of sexual assault or rape on the island, but I'm tired of it. I want the commissioner here to be able to answer to this. And I think as far as the board goes, you've made tremendous strides on what's going on the island. But I think we need to step it up when it comes to the PREA Act. I think that we need to make the island follow everything on the PREA Act, that the state follows, the state prisons follow, that the United States Attorney General put out. I also find it disconcerting of all the violence that's going on this island. This island has been degrading over the years, but yet it's allowed to remain open. We have a coalition over 64 organizations that are coming up with ideas and implementing speak outs, and we're having one today at Jails Action Coalition at City Hall steps at 1 p.m. on how to close down Rikers, to bring down the population on Rikers, to fix up these other borough jails so we can bring them off the island where we can have more accessibility and there's more accountability to what's going on with correction officers and staff overstepping their bounds and being part of the problem. And I think it's about time that the Board of Corrections step up, if you will, and help us accomplish this goal and accomplish the PREA Act being made, adhered to fully. Not just for regular women and men, but trans women as well on the island. It seems that we go through more abuse on the island than a lot of the other detainees. And especially when it comes to sexual assault and rape. So please help us. Thank you.
Grace Price.
Yeah, I'm going to comment. I'm disappointed that the board has not yet issued its rule. We have written a rule. We have consulted with all of the relevant departments. We have distributed the rule for them to comment on. We've met with the district attorney. We've met with the Bronx. We've met with, and we have not. And we're ready to publish this rule. And it's been held back because of the department's failure to comment on it. I expect them to comment in the next couple of days. I don't know when they're going to comment, but it is a very serious issue that the board is engaged. It is not. It's not something that doesn't matter how long it takes for us to come up with these rules. I know there are many people in the department who care about this a lot, but we have a rule which is completed, which should be submitted to CAPA, where it can be discussed, where there can be hearings about it, and unfortunately, we have not gone forward with that yet. I believe that I heard, I did hear, our chair saying that we're going to present it by the next meeting, and I hope that that's the case. If it were up to me, we would have been hearing it today.
Thank you. Just to note for the record, PREA is the law of the land. The department must comply with PREA. What is before us as a board is converting that to the additional level of rules and perhaps adding to it, going beyond PREA, what we choose to be PREA plus, but let's make no mistake about it. The Department of Correction of the City of New York is bound by PREA. That's their view as well. Grace Price.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Grace Price. I'll only take a minute because, as you heard, we have a rally in 20 minutes at City Hall. I just want to thank the board I've heard that you've been working on harm reduction, specifically around rape and sexual assault. I might add that I'm a member of the Jails Action Coalition, sorry, I beg your pardon, for over a year. And we're so heartened to hear about this. The rest of the audience may not know that we had a meeting at the National Organization for Women last Friday, and a couple of the specialists from the community that work specifically in trauma centers at our community hospitals came and spoke to a couple members of the board about their experience and about what it really means to give sufficient trauma treatment to rape and sexual assault complainants and survivors. And I noticed that Bobby Cohen reacted very positively to this testimony. I might add that personally I was surprised that these specific community members hadn't been approached by anybody in the docs or the board. If you've been working on implementation for a year, it would seem to me that the first people that you'd reach out to are people at the Crime Victims Center at St. Luke's West, Mount Sinai Hospital. They treated me for many years, and they've had the contract to do rape and trauma treatment for the state docs telephonically for the past couple of years. It seems to me that these things should have been done a long time ago. And to just be getting community input at the end of the process, at the 23rd hour, seems a little backwards. So I might add that I'm very encouraged by the recent events, and I'm hoping that our organizing brings more of those voices to you very quickly, and I promise to be a steward of those voices coming to you very quickly. I know my colleague Riley Doyle-Evans from the BDS has already sent you a hand list of immediate sort of top asks that rape and trauma specialists would demand, specifically some of the details that the experts from Savvy brought to the agenda. And I know that Riley will make sure that all of our comments in those areas get to you expediently. And I very graciously ask you to put pressure on the docs to give response. I don't really know how the process works, but why does the docs get to approve the board's rule before it's sent out to the public for comment? That's insane to me. Maybe I'm missing something, but we'd like to see it. And the specialists would like to see it. And Sonia Serio now would like to see it. So anyway, I thank you for your time, and again for always letting me come and speak my mind. But as a survivor of rape, as a survivor of trafficking, as a survivor of domestic violence, as a survivor of the Trade Center, I'm telling you that trauma follow-up and care with a specialist is integral to any survivor's redemption and rebuilding. And filibustering about reviewing these rules just seems to me to send a message to survivors on the island that their voices are still not heard. So let's get to hearing them. Thank you very much.
Mick or Mike Kincaid?
Hi, thank you. So my name is Mick Kincaid. I'm an attorney at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, and I'm also a member of JAC. And I'm the director of the Prisoner Justice Project at Sylvia Rivera Law Project. So in case you're not aware, SRLP serves TGNCI people, which is transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex people in the 5 boroughs, and also transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex people who are incarcerated upstate. We serve roughly 400 discrete individuals each year, and my program specifically just works with people who are in prisons and jails. So we are the only organization and provider in New York State just focusing on TGNCI people who have lived in prisons and jails. So with that in mind, I want to speak about the importance of having meaningful PREA standards that are specific to New York City. The federal standards are just the floor that we can build off of, and the Public Advocate, the Legal Aid Society, and SRLP have all sent comments to the Board of Correction about what it would mean to have meaningful PREA standards for the population that is in New York City. So some of these rules I just want to highlight that are very important and meaningful for the New York City population includes having accountability for uniformed and civilian staff who are implicated in sexual violence, including having them being removed from the unit where the individual is housed. That's such a basic thing, but people who are surviving sexual violence, and sexual violence is a large category because as we've seen from the testimony already about visiting, it starts with things that might be seen as small, especially to someone who's not a survivor of sexual violence. Something like being asked to remove your bra in order to visit, or being asked to remove your tampon in order to visit. Those are the beginnings of sexual violence. That is sexual violence, and it just leads to higher and higher standards, or higher and higher actions after that. So to actually remove people who are doing these actions from having contact with visitors from having contact with the individuals who are making these claims against them. Not having them continuing to be on the same tour of duty and seeing the person who is surviving every single day when they do their rounds. Making sure that the standards for incarcerated people and uniformed and civilian staff implicated in sexual violence are the same, and that doc staff don't have a higher standard that they need to go to. And having the level of care for survivors the same as people who are not on the inside. Grace just spoke about this, but making sure that people who are being brought to rape and trauma victim centers get the full care that they would have if they weren't incarcerated. Right now we're seeing that they're rushed through those processes, they're not having sufficient time to actually rest and take advantage of the mental health care that's available, and that's not comparable care to if they were not incarcerated. And then close to my heart are the many comments that have already been submitted on behalf of transgender individuals in the jails. No transgender person should be held in solitary or a solitary-like condition just because of their identity. And right now we know that for transgender men, the only options are general population or solitary. That's not an option. That's not actually meaningful safety options for an individual. And we consistently hear that the current trans housing unit for trans women and trans feminine people will close because it's not PREA compliant. This is not true. That is not what PREA says. It is a voluntary unit, and in the nature of the Prison Rape Elimination Act, it is eliminating sexual violence for trans women and trans feminine people. I have represented about 30 individuals who have gone through the THU, and around 26 of them experienced harassing language, pat frisk that were just basically poorly masked groping sessions, consistent unwanted touching, and rape while outside the trans housing unit, or while they're being escorted from and to the trans housing unit, but none have reported that happening while they're in the trans housing unit. The transgender housing unit is eliminating rape on the New York City jails. So to close it would be completely contrary to the Prison Rape Elimination Act. But then finally, even if you don't like that as a thought, as an idea, there is no reason why trans women can't be housed in the women's jails. There's absolutely no reason. And the Department of Justice has clarified this, the PREA Resource Center has clarified this. We cannot be housing people because of their genitalia in a facility, or because of their sex assigned at birth. We know that there have been at least two transgender women who were housed in the women's jail initially, but when they came out as transgender, they were immediately taken to the men's jails. Why? Why would that happen? They were in the women's jails already. There was nothing wrong. The PREA standards as they are in the federal language are fine, but we can have a better standard that actually shows that transgender people and transgender women in particular are valued and respected as full humans. I could speak about sexual violence in the New York City jails for a long time, but I just wanted to share something that I recently received from a trans woman who bounced about between different men's facilities and the trans housing unit, but she's now upstate. And she wrote to me, or rather when she was in the trans housing unit, she talked to me about some of the really consistent sexual violence that she experienced while on the island. And there was consistent groping, inappropriate comments from staff, grabbing her breasts and her genitals, cornering her on the way to and from the showers, and refusing to provide bras unless she flashed them. Well, I spoke to her about her legal recourse and her legal rights, and she just said, well, why would I bother doing that? They will never admit that this happened, and the DOC hold all of the evidence that this happened to me. People don't think that I'm human, and they think that I deserve this. And the board needs to send a message that people who are incarcerated in the New York City jails are people, and that they are our neighbors and they are our families, and that they are going to come home to us, and we need to be responsible for what happens to them while in the New York City jails. The sentence that they're serving, or as Zena pointed out, just being detained, they're not serving any sentence, it never involves sexual violence. There's no excuse for it to be happening. And the board needs to move up in this process, and also I think really needs to visit the people, in particular trans women in the trans housing unit and in the men's jails, who are surviving this, and talk to them about what they need and what they want. And when the rule gets promulgated, hopefully in June, that needs to be available to people in the jails to actually see. It's been brought up by someone in the Jails Action Coalition that when these posts are made, they're put in the law library, which for a lot of people means a special escort. So just think about making this actually accessible and meaningfully accessible to people who are incarcerated who can speak the most on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, this question of whether the units are compliant with PREA, is that something that we need to hear what the thinking is? Because my understanding is we've been advised that they're not compliant. I think this point that you raised about compliance of the units is something we'd like to hear more about your thinking on the transgender units, because we've been advised contrary to that.
I mean, SLP submitted comments last May, and we have been around for 12 years, so we're here for making comments and talking about this.
Well, I think we'd like to have some more discussion, because we've been very focused on, it's one of the issues we focused on as an undesirable development at a PREA, which would delimit something that we saw as a safeguard and as something worth protecting. So we will call it.
And I don't believe the board would submit a PREA quote-unquote rule which had which banned those units. That would not be in the rule that we would vote on.
But we'd like, to the degree we have more flexibility than we think we have, that would be good.
If we can say, we can demand it, we can. I think the Justice Department is discussing this always.
Any new business?
I would like to ask, hearing all of the comments from the folks about their experience at visits, as we are staffing up, I'd like for us to think about allocating some resources to ensure that we have staff who are staying on top of what's happening at the visit house. I think we have staff in almost all facilities. I don't know if we have anybody assigned to the visit house, but as we staff up, it would be nice if we can have a staff member assigned to the visit house so we can have eyes on that experience.
Any further new business? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Yeah.